Welcome to my channel. Support our channel by subscribing. Your subscription helps us grow and create more intriguing content like this. Now, let's dive into today's story. Ethan had always believed his marriage to Sophia was perfect. Their 7 years together had been marked by love, shared dreams, and an unshakable sense of partnership, or so he thought. Ethan was a dedicated travel blogger, exploring the world and sharing his adventures with millions of followers. Sophia, his supportive and charismatic wife, ran a small boutique in their quiet town. Together, they seemed like the ideal couple. But every story, no matter how picturesque, can hide shadows. After months of constant travel, Ethan finally decided to take a day for himself. He'd returned home late the previous night from a grueling trip to Iceland, intending to surprise Sophia. Exhausted but content, he lounged in the living room with a cup of coffee. The sunlight poured in through the large windows, casting a golden glow over the room. The house was quiet, except for the occasional chirping of birds outside. Ethan relished the rare tranquility, savoring the rich aroma of his coffee. As he relaxed, he began scrolling through his phone, revisiting photos from his recent trips. Pictures of glaciers, northern lights, and bustling Reykjavik markets filled his screen. Among them were pictures of him and Sophia from happier times, a reminder of what they once had. A pang of guilt struck him. His constant traveling while fulfilling professionally had kept him away from Sophia far more than he'd realized. Determined to make it up to her, Ethan resolved to spend the day together. Just as he was about to call out for her, Sophia entered the room. She appeared surprised, almost startled, to see him. Her white blouse and jeans were perfectly pressed, and she carried an air of someone heading out rather than staying home. "You're home early," she said, her voice carrying a subtle edge of unease. Ethan smiled, ignoring the odd tone. "Thought I'd surprise you. Let's spend the day together. Maybe grab lunch or go for a walk?" Sophia hesitated. Her eyes darted briefly toward the door before she replied, "I wish I could, but I've got errands to run for the boutique. Maybe later?" Her response stung, but Ethan masked his disappointment. "All right, let me know when you're free," he said, his voice warm but tinged with a hint of doubt. As she left, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her demeanor, the hurried way she grabbed her bag, the fleeting glance she avoided, they planted seeds of suspicion in his mind. Sophia's departure left Ethan restless. He replayed their interaction in his mind, questioning whether he was overthinking things. The rational part of him dismissed his unease as paranoia born from exhaustion. Yet, a nagging voice inside urged him to follow her. Grabbing his jacket, Ethan slipped out of the house and got into his car, making sure to keep a safe distance as he trailed Sophia through town. The streets were busy, filled with people going about their day, which helped him remain inconspicuous. Sophia drove with purpose, eventually parking near a row of small shops. Ethan parked a little farther down and watched as she walked briskly into Leo's store. Leo was the local shopkeeper, a charismatic man known for his friendly demeanor and easy conversations. Ethan had often exchanged pleasantries with him during visits to the store, never suspecting anything out of the ordinary. But today, something about the interaction between Leo and Sophia felt different. Positioning himself discreetly near the store's side window, Ethan peered inside. What he saw sent a chill down his spine. Sophia and Leo stood close, laughing in a way that seemed too intimate. Leo reached out, placing a hand on Sophia's arm. The gesture lingered longer than it should have, and Sophia didn't pull away. Instead, she smiled, her body language relaxed and open. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. A rush of emotions, anger, disbelief, sadness, washed over him. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to storm inside. Instead, he remained frozen, watching the scene play out like a slow-motion nightmare. His world, once so secure, now felt like it was crumbling around him. Ethan spent the rest of the day in turmoil. He drove aimlessly around town, trying to process what he'd seen. Questions swirled in his mind. How long had this been going on? Was it just a fleeting mistake, or something deeper? By the time he returned home, he felt emotionally drained, but resolute. He needed answers. When Sophia arrived that evening, she seemed cheerful, as if nothing had happened. Her carefree demeanor only deepened Ethan's anger and confusion. Over dinner, he decided to confront her. "How was your meeting with the supplier?" he asked casually, keeping his tone neutral. Sophia's fork froze mid-air. For a split second, her expression faltered before she recovered. Welcome to my channel. Support our channel by subscribing. Your subscription helps us grow and create more intriguing content like this. Now, let's dive into today's story. Ethan had always believed his marriage to Sophia was perfect. Their 7 years together had been marked by love, shared dreams, and an unshakable sense of partnership, or so he thought. Ethan was a dedicated travel blogger, exploring the world and sharing his adventures with millions of followers. Sophia, his supportive and charismatic wife, ran a small boutique in their quiet town. Together, they seemed like the ideal couple. But every story, no matter how picturesque, can hide shadows. After months of constant travel, Ethan finally decided to take a day for himself. He'd returned home late the previous night from a grueling trip to Iceland, intending to surprise Sophia. Exhausted but content, he lounged in the living room with a cup of coffee. The sunlight poured in through the large windows, casting a golden glow over the room. The house was quiet, except for the occasional chirping of birds outside. Ethan relished the rare tranquility, savoring the rich aroma of his coffee. As he relaxed, he began scrolling through his phone, revisiting photos from his recent trips. Pictures of glaciers, northern lights, and bustling Reykjavik markets filled his screen. Among them were pictures of him and Sophia from happier times, a reminder of what they once had. A pang of guilt struck him. His constant traveling while fulfilling professionally had kept him away from Sophia far more than he'd realized. Determined to make it up to her, Ethan resolved to spend the day together. Just as he was about to call out for her, Sophia entered the room. She appeared surprised, almost startled, to see him. Her white blouse and jeans were perfectly pressed, and she carried an air of someone heading out rather than staying home. "You're home early," she said, her voice carrying a subtle edge of unease. Ethan smiled, ignoring the odd tone. "Thought I'd surprise you. Let's spend the day together. Maybe grab lunch or go for a walk?" Sophia hesitated. Her eyes darted briefly toward the door before she replied, "I wish I could, but I've got errands to run for the boutique. Maybe later?" Her response stung, but Ethan masked his disappointment. "All right. Let me know when you're free," he said, his voice warm but tinged with a hint of doubt. As she left, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her demeanor, the hurried way she grabbed her bag, the fleeting glance she avoided, they planted seeds of suspicion in his mind. Sophia's departure left Ethan restless. He replayed their interaction in his mind, questioning whether he was overthinking things. The rational part of him dismissed his unease as paranoia born from exhaustion. Yet, a nagging voice inside urged him to follow her. Grabbing his jacket, Ethan slipped out of the house and got into his car, making sure to keep a safe distance as he trailed Sophia through town. The streets were busy, filled with people going about their day, which helped him remain inconspicuous. Sophia drove with purpose, eventually parking near a row of small shops. Ethan parked a little farther down and watched as she walked briskly into Leo's store. Leo was the local shopkeeper, a charismatic man known for his friendly demeanor and easy conversations. Ethan had often exchanged pleasantries with him during visits to the store, never suspecting anything out of the ordinary. But today, something about the interaction between Leo and Sophia felt different. Positioning himself discreetly near the store's side window, Ethan peered inside. What he saw sent a chill down his spine. Sophia and Leo stood close, laughing in a way that seemed too intimate. Leo reached out, placing a hand on Sophia's arm. The gesture lingered longer than it should have, and Sophia didn't pull away. Instead, she smiled, her body language relaxed and open. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. A rush of emotions, anger, disbelief, sadness, washed over him. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to storm inside. Instead, he remained frozen, watching the scene play out like a slow-motion nightmare. His world, once so secure, now felt like it was crumbling around him. Ethan spent the rest of the day in turmoil. He drove aimlessly around town, trying to process what he'd seen. Questions swirled in his mind. How long had this been going on? Was it just a fleeting mistake, or something deeper? By the time he returned home, he felt emotionally drained, but resolute. He needed answers. When Sophia arrived that evening, she seemed cheerful, as if nothing had happened. Her carefree demeanor only deepened Ethan's anger and confusion. Over dinner, he decided to confront her. "How was your meeting with the supplier?" he asked casually, keeping his tone neutral. Sophia's fork froze mid-air. For a split second, her expression faltered before she recovered, selecting photos with care and pouring herself into every story. The blog was more than a project. It was the living history of their life together. With a deep breath, Ethan clicked. The screen refreshed, and the first post disappeared, then the next. Post by post, he erased their shared narrative. The images vanished, replaced by blank spaces. The stories, once vibrant with emotion, were reduced to nothing. The deletion process was deliberate, almost ritualistic. Each click felt like shedding a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. When the last post was gone, Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the now empty site. The silence in the room was deafening, but it brought an unexpected sense of calm. Morning came, and with it, the inevitable confrontation. Sophia's anguished scream shattered the quiet as she discovered the erased blog. She stormed into Ethan's office, her face a mixture of disbelief and devastation. "Ethan, what have you done?" she cried, clutching her phone as if it could restore what had been lost. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I erased it." "Why?" Her voice broke, tears streaming down her face. "That blog was everything. It was us." Ethan's gaze hardened. "It was a monument to a life I thought we shared, but now it feels like a lie." Sophia sank to her knees, sobbing. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I'll do anything to fix this. Please." He sighed, his tone weary but firm. "Some things can't be fixed, Sophia. Trust doesn't regenerate like a blog. It's gone." Leaving her there, Ethan walked out of the room. His steps were steady, but his heart was heavy. He wasn't sure if what he'd done was justice or just another wound, but it felt final. In the weeks that followed, Ethan rebuilt the blog, but this time it reflected his solo journey. Each post carried an authenticity born from pain and growth, resonating deeply with his audience. He wrote not just about destinations, but about resilience, forgiveness, and the power of moving forward. In his final post of the year, Ethan wrote, "Life takes us to unexpected places. Some paths bring joy, others bring lessons we never asked for. To those who followed my journey, thank you for walking with me. Here's to new beginnings." The entry received thousands of comments, none of which knew the true story behind the words. And as Ethan clicked publish, he felt a sense of closure. His journey was far from over, but it was finally his own. Thank you for being part of my journey.
Growing up, I always felt like life was steady and predictable. I had my routines, my home, and the things that made me feel secure. I valued that predictability until one night when my world changed in an unexpected way. It wasn't anything major, just a small disruption, but it marked the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about myself. It started with a simple sound. The clattering of a trash bin knocked over in the middle of the night startled me awake. I was already annoyed this had happened before. I figured it was the stray dogs again, but little did I know that this minor disturbance would lead me to meet two people who would disrupt my quiet life in unimaginable ways. I groggily made my way to the back door, club in hand, irritated by the all-too-familiar mess outside. For the third time that week, I'd been woken up by the sound of trash cans being knocked over. I was fed up with cleaning up someone else's problem. Why couldn't people keep their pets under control? While I understood the animals were probably hungry, it didn't ease my frustration. I cautiously opened the gate, ready to deal with the nuisance. As I neared the overturned garbage, I saw two shadowy figures standing by the mess, and my grip on the club tightened as they noticed me. "Please, sir, we're just hungry," one of them said. "We'll clean everything up. Don't hurt us." These weren't dogs. They were children. But they certainly seemed wild. It was dark, so I grabbed them by their collars and dragged them into the backyard under the security lights. I picked them up to get a better look. They were scruffy and dirty, dressed in oversized, ragged clothes and baseball caps. It was cold out, and I saw them shivering. "Did you two knock over my trash earlier this week?" I asked. They exchanged glances. "Yeah, you always throw out something like pizza or food," one of them replied. "I'm sorry we did this. We won't do it again. Just let us go. We'll clean everything up." This won't do. I gripped their shirts tightly and led them inside. I brought them straight to the bathroom, pushed them in, and shut the door. "Don't come out until I'm back," I said. I went and grabbed some of my ex-wife's sweatpants, sweatshirts, clean socks, and big fluffy towels. When I returned, they had tried to open the window to escape. "You might like being dirty," I said, "but I doubt a hot shower will hurt you. There's soap and shampoo here. These are clean clothes and towels. Get undressed and get in the shower." "We don't like being dirty," the larger one growled. "We just don't have a shower as nice as yours." "Are you going to stand there the whole time? You probably think we'll steal something," I said. "Yeah, right," the kid snapped. "We're not going to steal your toilet paper. We're not thieves. What, are you some kind of creep? You into little girls?" I was shocked. Now that I looked closer, beneath all that dirt, they were definitely girls. I didn't realize you were girls. Just clean yourselves up and I'll get you something to eat. Come to the kitchen when you're done." I left them in the bathroom and headed to the kitchen. I opened the fridge and took stock. There was cold fried chicken, half a bowl of potato salad, a tray of veggies, some sandwich pastrami, and dill pickles. I split the chicken between two plates, 3 pieces each, and added a big scoop of potato salad. I put some veggies on a plate with dip, threw a few pickles on the side, and made pastrami sandwiches for each of them. I even added some chips for good measure. Hopefully, they'd like the Munster cheese, mayo, and mustard on their sandwiches. I heard the bathroom door creak open, followed by hushed whispers outside the kitchen. A minute later, 2 of the most beautiful girls I'd ever seen stepped into the room. They had long, jet-black hair, olive skin, and the brightest green, almond-shaped eyes I'd ever seen, along with high cheekbones and the cutest little noses. They looked like they were still in their early teens, maybe around 11 or 12. It was amusing to see them in Brianna's clothes. She's tall, and they were tiny, with their sleeves and pant legs rolled up, looking a bit like tramps. "Have a seat," I said, offering them a chair. "Do you want Coca-Cola, or I have juice or milk?" They both asked for milk. "My name is McKay North," I said as I poured the milk and placed it in front of them. "What are your names?" "My name's Maggie," said the older one, short for Margaret. "This is Stokely." "Can we really eat all this?" she asked. "You can have more if you want sandwiches," I replied. "But I'm not cooking at 2 a.m. I'll make something in the morning." "No, this is great, thank you," Stokely said, while Maggie eyed me warily. "What do you want from us? We don't do any dirty stuff," Maggie said suspiciously. I laughed. "Neither do I. If either of you had designs on my virtue, you'd be disappointed." They didn't seem to get my humor. "I'm not into little girls," I added. They didn't like being called little girls, but they started eating, and fast, like wolves. "Hey, slow down," I told them. "The chickens aren't going anywhere. They're dead, and the potatoes were never fast. You'll hurt your stomach." This made them giggle, and they started eating more slowly. "Where do you two live?" I asked. "There's an empty house at the end of the block," Maggie answered. "We found a mattress and some blankets, but we're afraid pill dependents might move in. Once they know it's empty, they will—" "How about sleeping in a warm, clean bed tonight?" I offered. They looked at me suspiciously again. Not mine, I laughed. I have 3 extra bedrooms. Well, they're mine too, but you know what I mean. They laughed nervously. We don't have any money, Stokely said. We can't pay you. We just collect cans, but we spend all our money on food. I'm not asking for money, I said. Did I say anything about you paying me? Why are you doing this? She asked. Why are you so kind to us, Mac? Call me Mac, I said. Everyone does. Why are you being so nice, Mac? Maggie pressed. I'm not trying to be cute, I told her. I'm a good guy. Just ask my mom. This brought smiles to their faces, and I liked it. I made a mental note to get them to smile more often. If I were in your shoes, I'd want someone to be kind to me, I said. They seemed to be thinking it over. Can I have some of these chips? Stokely asked. I pushed the bag toward them, and they both reached in while continuing to eat their sandwiches. I finished my own and noticed they were still hungry, so I poured them more milk. They drank it all and cleaned their plates, even the vegetables. They must have been starving. Go to bed, I told them. Each of you has your own bathroom. There are toothbrushes, combs, and other things like that. Aspirin, stomach medicine, toothpaste, and dental floss are in the first aid kits. If you need anything else, just ask. Can we lock the doors? Maggie asked. Yes, but if I knock, you have to open them within a reasonable time, I said. They exchanged a glance. Then Maggie's green eyes lit up. He thinks we'll steal something, she told Stokely. Don't worry, Mac, we won't take anything. It's okay if you don't trust us. We don't really trust you either. I had to laugh. Fair enough. We have mutual distrust. But you'll soon learn you can trust me. I almost never hurt beautiful girls. This brought another set of dazzling smiles. They followed me down the hallway to their rooms. I heard the locks click and smiled to myself. As I returned to bed, I lay awake for a while wondering what had happened to these girls. Why were they digging through my trash? Why were they alone? Where was their family? I planned to get some answers in the morning. I was getting dressed when I heard the floorboards creaking in the hall. I cracked the door open and saw them sneaking toward the living room. I figured they were about to leave, so I stepped out. They froze. Girls, are you ready for breakfast? I asked. They looked at each other. Maybe we should just leave, Maggie said. You're not going to lock us up or anything, are you? You mean make you stay? I asked. They glanced at each other again and nodded. No, I won't force you to stay, I said. That's not how I do things, but I'd love for you to have breakfast with me. They looked at each other once more. Will you let us go after? Stokely asked. If that's what you want, I said. Though I was hoping you'd spend the day with me, but if you have somewhere else to be, that's okay. Yeah, we've got to meet our stockbroker, Maggie quipped, her face lighting up like a Christmas tree. So, what's for breakfast? No, what are you going to feed us? She corrected herself. Are you an English teacher or something? Actually, yes, I said. I teach English literature at the university. Cool, Stokely said. We don't go to school. Too busy. But you're having breakfast, right? I was thinking waffles and bacon. Sound good? It did. So we headed to the kitchen. They got out the waffle iron while I mixed the batter, and they made waffles while I fried 2 pounds of bacon. I'm kind of a syrup snob. I'm a coffee snob, too. I let Maggie turn the bacon while I ground the coffee beans. Everything came together nicely, and we had real maple syrup and waffles. They horrified me by asking for coffee creamer, but I kept some around for the barbarians and Brianna, and they loved the vanilla flavor. We ate all the bacon, and they each had 3 waffles. Stick with me, girls, and in a week you'll be as fat as toads, I joked. They laughed, and it was the best sound I'd ever heard. Then they gulped down milk like hungry calves. My pantry was definitely going to need restocking. So, tell me about Maggie and Stokely, I asked. What's going on with you two? Why are you digging through people's trash for food? We took our coffee into the living room, and they shared their sad story. Their father had been a car mechanic. He lost his job when they were young, which led him to start drinking and abusing them. Their mother eventually divorced him, and they never saw him again. The economy in Detroit was falling apart, making it hard to find work. Their mom drove a taxi to support them, but one night she picked up the wrong passenger. He stabbed her for the little money she had and left her to bleed to end of life. The girls were put into foster care, but the foster homeowner began maltreating them. They ran away and lived on the streets for 3 months. Their last name was Steele, and they constantly worried about freezing to end of life, being maltreated or eliminated, and where their next meal would come from. I sat quietly after they finished their story. My heart broke for them. I wondered how many more kids like them were out there, living the same story. This was probably more common than I had ever realized. I wondered if they'd let me help them, and how I even could. It seemed unlikely that children's services would let them stay with me. A single man housing 2 young girls? It sounded like something a carnivore would dream up, and I doubted social services would allow it. They interrupted my thoughts. "Mac, are you married?" Stokely asked. "I was," I replied, "but my ex thought I wasn't ambitious enough. She's a hotshot lawyer and has been all over. There was no room for marriage in her life." "What a witch," Maggie commented. I laughed. "She's actually a really good person. She didn't cheat or anything, and we're still close friends. We both agreed we should never have gotten married. We were too young and too dumb." "How old are you?" Stokely asked. "I'm 28, I told her. "How old are you?" "I'm 11, and she's 13, Stokely answered. "What are you doing today?" I asked. "What are we doing today?" She corrected herself. "Yes, what you said." "We're going to talk," I said, "and I'll introduce you to someone." I opened the garage door, and suddenly a mass of fur came bounding in. He spotted our guests and leaped onto the sofa, settling on their laps and licking them with his big pink tongue. "This is Granville," I said, "but I call him Grandma." The girls burst into giggles as the dog covered them with licks. At 130 pounds, they could barely move him. "Lie down, Grandma," I commanded, and he reluctantly settled on their legs. "He's huge," Stokely laughed, stroking his head. "What kind of dog is this? He's striped like a tiger." "He's a bull mastiff," I explained. "That's why he has that brindle color." "He looks like he could bite our faces off," Maggie said. "Yes, he could, but he won't. He's gentle with my friends. He sees you here being kind, so he loves you. If you were threatening, he'd get aggressive. Now that he knows you, he won't let anyone be mean to you. If I yell at you, he won't like it. He protects the people he cares about." Stokely slid down and wrapped her arms around the dog's neck as he licked her hand. "I love him," she said. "He's so wrinkly and cute." "Does he live in the garage?" she asked. "No, he lives in the house," I replied. "He got sick yesterday, so I put him outside to avoid a mess." "What made him sick?" Stokely asked. "He eats things he shouldn't. Sticks, bugs, dead stuff." "You name it. He seems fine now, though." "Gross," Maggie said. "He licked my face." "Yeah, he's a bit disgusting, but he's my buddy. He'll be your buddy too if you let him. We should take him for a walk." I grabbed his leash, and Maggie wanted to lead him. But really the dog led her, dragging her a few yards ahead of Stokely and me. Stokely slipped her small hand into mine, and I looked down at her. She smiled up at me. She was so beautiful. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "I like holding hands with pretty girls." She blushed a little, but didn't let go. We walked for a couple of miles, and by the time we got back, Granville was panting and drooling. It was cold out, but he didn't seem to care. We drank more coffee and talked for the rest of the day. Eventually, I asked them if they'd let me help them. "What can you do?" Maggie asked. "I'm not sure," I admitted, "but I could talk to Brianna. She's a lawyer, though a different kind. Maybe she'll have some ideas." "Is this the same witch?" Maggie asked. "Maggie, stop calling her that. She's not a witch. Do you trust me?" I asked. They exchanged looks and nodded. "Yeah, I guess," Stokely said. "You've been really kind to us." "Okay, let's call her and see if she can come over. I think you'll like her. Just give her a chance." Brianna was busy, but agreed to come over for dinner. Bri is a tall, stunning redhead, and even though she doesn't realize it, she's incredibly sexy. When she walked in, I could tell the girls were impressed. She kissed me until my toes curled, then hugged both girls. "You've replaced me?" she teased, winking at them. "No, Bri, you're irreplaceable," I joked. She beamed, clearly pleased. I explained to the girls that Bri and I were still good friends, and we were. We had a friends with benefits kind of relationship. We still had great sex, sometimes once a week, sometimes more. Occasionally, she'd stay with me for a week, and we'd have sex like rabbits. But she didn't have time for a husband, and I doubted she ever would. We loved each other, but we couldn't make marriage work. As friends, we were great, but as a married couple, we fought constantly. "So, who are your new girlfriends?" she asked, smiling at them. I saw they were dazzled. "I'm Maggie, and this is Stokely." "Nice to meet you," Bri said. "You know this guy's dangerous, right?" "Not to us," Stokely said. "But he could be to someone who's his enemy. He has a club, and a very big dog." Bri nudged Granville with her boot, and he grumbled in his sleep. "Hey, big guy, She knelt down and hugged him. Miss me? He rolled his eyes but didn't have the energy to lift his head. What's going on, Mac? She asked. What did you need to talk about? Not that I mind coming over for dinner. He's a great cook, girls, if you can get him motivated. I think he made lamb chops, Maggie said. We've never had anything like this before. Well, sounds like I'm in for a treat, but seriously, what's the big deal? She asked again. During dinner, I explained. We need your help, Bree, I said. We don't know anything about legal stuff. The girls are orphans. Their dad might be alive, but no one knows where he is. He abandoned them and their mom was eliminated. They ended up in foster care where some creep started maltreating them. They ran away and have been living on the streets. I found them digging through my trash, and now we're trying to figure out how to keep them from going back to that life. She looked at me for a moment. You want them, don't you? She said, exhaling. Jesus, Mac, you've always wanted kids. And because I didn't give you any, you want them, don't you? I blushed. Yeah, I kind of do. What do you think, Bree? What's the best way to handle this? I don't think it's possible, she said. No family court is going to give you two young girls. You're a single guy. It's a disaster waiting to happen. They won't allow it. I looked at the girls, and their wide eyes were on me. What? I asked. They exchanged glances and suddenly burst into tears, running up to hug me. You wanted to keep us? Stokely sobbed. I can't believe it. I never thought we'd find anyone. Anyone. She couldn't finish through the tears. I held them tight. Yes, girls, I did think about it. You need someone to look after you, and I need someone to look after me. I thought we could figure this out together. Their small bodies trembled as they clung to me. I looked at Bree, helpless, as tears streamed down her face. She glanced from the girls to me. Damn it, Mac. Look what you've done to me. Just when I think I've got you figured out, you surprise me. What am I going to do with you? She had a strange expression, like she was seeing me in a new light. Give me a few days to think. Girls, you're coming with me. You can't stay here with Mac. It'll ruin everything if anyone finds out. Mac, we're taking Grandma too. I can't stay home without him, and you'll have to look after the girls. She whisked them and the dog out the door like a whirlwind and into her Mercedes. I'll call you, she said. Over the next 2 weeks, she called me for about 30 seconds 3 times, but I didn't see her or the girls. Then on a Friday morning, she called and asked to meet for dinner at Alfonso's, a little Italian place in Pontiac that we frequented. When I arrived, she was already at the bar, with guys hovering around her. The moment she saw me, she jumped up, leaving them in the dust. We walked to our usual booth, but this time she sat next to me instead of across the table, which was unusual. We ordered, and she stayed quiet for a bit. Finally, she said, You know I love you, right, Mac? Yes, and I love you too, I replied. I'm not talking about loving your mom or anything like that. I'm in love with you, Mac. I always have been, ever since that day at Cedar Point. You're the only man I've ever loved or will ever love, she said. I trust you completely. I love everything about you, except the part where we were married. You know I need to be free. No commitments, no baggage, no ties. I love my job and my life, but I don't love them more than I love you, and I don't have to choose. You're as faithful as Grandma. We've got an understanding. I don't sleep with anyone but you, never have. You always got that about me, which is why what I'm about to say is going to sound crazy. Ooh, I joked. Sounds like I'm in for a shock. She gave me a look. Yes, you are. Will you marry me, Mac? I nearly choked on my wine. Getting wine in your lungs is not ideal. Once I recovered, I just sat there stunned, my mouth open. Stop being an idiot and answer me, she barked. Hell no, I finally managed. Why, Bree, we make each other miserable. In a month, we'll be at each other's throats. What's wrong with how things are now? Nothing, she admitted. This isn't about us. It's about the sweetest, most adorable girls on the planet. Mac, I'm completely in love with them. You wrecked my life by inviting me over that night. They're desperate to see you. Every night, they beg and cry to come see you. But I'm not giving them up. I've never been happier than I am with them, and no judge would give us custody. Not to me, not to you, not to either of us alone. But if we were married, they'd give them to us in a heartbeat. So I need them. And if I need them, I need you. If you want them, you'll have to deal with me too. Can we do this, Mac? I doubt it, I told her. You're as bad as me. You come home drunk, you're never on time for anything except work, and half the time you don't come home at all. Bree, we've been through this. I know, but what if things are different now? I can't wait to come home to them. I always call when I'm running late, and since they've been with me, I only have one glass of wine a night. I didn't know I could feel this way. Marry me, Mac. Give me a chance. We should talk this over, I said. Then talk. What are we doing here? You think I'm joking around? Tell me what's going on. Should I start? I signaled the waiter for more wine. Go ahead. What drives me crazy about you is your need to control me, she said. You have to know every detail. Where I am, who I'm with, what I'm doing, when I'll be home. You're paranoid. If you could just stop trying to control me, we'd still be married. But you can't help it. You know you're the only man I've ever cared about, right? Yeah, I do, I said. It used to drive me nuts. I was always worried you'd find someone else and leave me. That's never going to happen, she promised. I've never even considered another man since the day I met you. Sure, I go to dinners and dances with clients and colleagues, but that's just what I do. No one has touched me, and no one ever will. Do you believe me? Yes, and it's the same for me. I trust you, Bree. I know you'll never hurt me. I've always been in love with you, and I think you feel the same way. We were comfortable where we were. Well, I'm not comfortable anymore, she said. Those girls need a family. I love them almost as much as I love you, more than my job. And I want to be part of their lives. The only way that happens is if we do this together. Will you give me a chance, Mac? Will you marry me so we can be a family? I'll never have kids of my own. I'm too selfish for that. But these girls, we can take care of them. Marry me, and I'll make you happier than you've ever been. Okay, clearly you've had time to think about this, I said. Give me a little time too, okay? She looked at her watch. You got 20 minutes, she said. Wait, what? Do I have a deadline? I asked. Yeah, the girls are waiting outside. They'll be here in 10 minutes, and after a quick walk with Grandma, a car will pick us up and take us home. We quickly finished our food and stepped outside. A limo was waiting, but the girls were nowhere in sight. The driver mentioned they were walking the dog. He didn't seem too happy about it, probably not a fan of dog drool on the seats. After a few minutes, I saw the girls hurrying toward us. Let's go, Maggie said as they approached. Some guy was watching us and Grandma doesn't like him. He growled at him. I looked down the street and saw a young man walking our way. He looked about 20, with tattoos, piercings, a knit cap, and a hoodie. His sagging pants barely stayed on. He probably thought he looked intimidating. What are you staring at? He snapped at me. Nothing. We're just leaving, I replied. It's all yours. Nice jacket, fancy car, pretty women, he sneered. Looks like you've got some cash. The guy was nuts. I stood a good 8 inches taller than him and outweighed him by at least 100 pounds. No beer belly either. You better move along, kid, I told him. My dog really doesn't like you. He got about 4 feet from us. I'm not scared of any dog, he said. How much cash you got on you? He reached under his jacket and I caught a glimpse of metal. I kicked him square in the chest, sending him flying backward. A weapon fell out of his pants. Maggie lost her grip on Granville's leash as he lunged. The guy managed to protect his face with his arm, but I heard the crunch as Granville broke his forearm. He screamed, and Granville shredded his sleeve. Granville, down, I commanded. He backed off, sitting by my side. The guy writhed on the ground as I knelt next to him, Granville close by. Take it, Grandma, I said. Granville lunged forward, his jaws closing near the guy's neck. I think you're an idiot, I told him. What are you, some kind of moron? He nodded, fear etched on his face. Say it, I demanded. He didn't respond. Fight, Grandma, I ordered. The guy whimpered as blood trickled from where Granville's teeth grazed his neck. The sound of Granville's breathing filled the air. Say it, I repeated. I'm an idiot, he whispered. How much money do you have on you? I asked. Hand it over. He reached into his pocket, but Granville squeezed a little harder. Slowly, I warned. He pulled out a wad of cash and handed it to me. Let him go, Grandma, I said. Granville released him and the guy scrambled backward. I'll give you a 20-yard head start, I told him. Then I'm sending the dog after you. Better run fast. He bolted like a sprinter, but his pants fell halfway down. He stumbled, yanked them up with his good hand, and took off. You need a belt, I called after him. I turned back to the girls, who stood there with their mouths hanging open. I kicked the weapon into a storm drain. What? I asked. Bree was the first to speak. You're one nasty son of a witch, Mac. Remind us never to piss you off? The girls rushed over, and I hugged them. Oh my God, Mac, Stokely whispered into my chest. I thought that guy was scary, but you didn't even break a sweat. You did it for us, didn't you? Well, nobody messes with my girls, I told her. He even left you a little something for your college fund. I handed her the cash. She counted it. $700. The guy must have mugged a few people recently. She split it with Maggie, and we got into the limo. As I leaned back, hugging Maggie, I noticed something. "A van's coming for us," I said. "I know," Bree replied. "It's got some of our stuff." I raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I know I take a lot for granted," she laughed. "Girls," I said. "Yes, Bree and I will get married again, and you'll stay with us." The girls gasped and screamed. "Really?" Maggie asked. "She's really not a witch. You were right. We love Bree. She's been so good to us. We have all these new clothes, and she got us into this amazing school. We'll make you both proud. I promise." "We know you will, sweetheart. Don't worry," Bree reassured them. I was still in shock, trying to form words, but nothing came out. "Mac, you okay?" Stokely asked. Bree chuckled. "No, he's in full panic mode. His perfectly ordered world is about to get flipped upside down. His house is spotless, everything in perfect condition. Now he'll have underwear hanging in the shower, mixed up books, and drink rings on the coffee table, and it'll drive him crazy. I don't even know how he handles living with Granville. We'll just have to love him enough that he won't care about crumbs on the table." "Think we can do that?" "I think we can," Maggie laughed. "I'm not sure how," Bree started. "But oh, he loves pretty girls. Just bat your eyelashes and he'll melt. He'll be mad at me, but you girls will have to love us through it." "Wait a minute," I groaned. I didn't exactly agree to any of this. Bree, like her usual whirlwind self, was sweeping us all along. "Do you love Bree?" Stokely asked me. "Yes, I love her, on the other side of the city," I joked. "Yeah, but we all need to be together," Maggie said. They all burst out laughing at my remark, and I had to join them. The idea was absurd. How had I lost control so quickly? As usual, Brianna had just taken over. What started as my little attempt to help the girls had snowballed into a marriage and adoption plan. It was wild how small actions could send your life spiraling out of control. I thought it was reckless, and told Bree so. When we got back to my house, there was a flurry of activity. Movers were everywhere, hauling in piles of stuff and placing them in different rooms. To my surprise, loads of women's clothes started showing up in Maggie and Stokely's rooms. "Where did all this come from?" I asked Maggie as she zipped past. "Bree took us shopping a few times," she said, before disappearing into her room. Bree popped her head out of my bedroom. "Mac, do you ever throw anything away? You still have things from when we were married. I'm getting rid of this junk. I need drawer and closet space." I rushed over to rescue my high school Letterman jacket from the trash. "Stop it, Brianna," I shouted. "You can't just throw my stuff away. If I didn't want it, I wouldn't keep it. This is my house, and I'll throw your Boney back out if you don't stop." She stuck her head out and glared at me. "Boney back, huh?" she snorted. Then she grabbed my sleeve and dragged me into the bedroom, which looked like a tornado had hit it. In one swift move, she locked the door, pulled her dress over her head, and leaned over the bed. My breath caught. She wasn't wearing any underwear. We made love, and the next morning I slept in until 10 o'clock. After stumbling into the shower, shaving, and freshening up, I finally felt somewhat human again. Bree was still asleep, her fiery red hair falling across her face as she lay on her stomach. Damn, her bum was incredible. I wandered into the living room and found Granville fast asleep, drooling all over a pile of my best shirts. I sighed, grabbed a glass of orange juice and a bun, and called to him, "Come on, Grandma, let's get out of here." He lifted his head, rolled his eyes, and groaned as he got to his feet. We headed to the backyard, where he did his business before flopping down on my legs. The sun was warm, and I felt lazy, like a lizard basking in the heat. It was unusually warm for this time of year. The door opened, and Stokely stepped out with a glass of milk and a bun. "Hello, Angel," I waved. "Hi, Mac," she said, closing the door behind her. After a moment, she walked over to the glider where I was sitting. "Is there room for me?" she asked. I shifted over, and she curled up on my lap, resting her feet on the empty space. She sighed, took a bite of her bun, and looked at me with those big green eyes. "Mac," she began, crumbs falling onto our laps. Ah, I interrupted. "Finish eating, drink your milk, and then talk." She giggled and waited until her mouth was empty. "Mac," she started again, "if you adopt us, will you be our dad and Bree, our mom?" "Is that what you'd like?" I asked. "Oh, yes," she said. "Bree would be the coolest mom ever. You're not exactly cool, but you're reliable. I love you, and I think you'd be the best dad in the world." I almost choked. "Well," I muttered, "being reliable is better than being cool, right?" She laughed. I didn't mean it like that. I just mean Bree's like a force of nature and you're like a mountain. You know she really, really loves you. She talks about you all the time. She's told us everything about you two. Do you love her? Yes, sweetie, but like you said, she's a force of nature. Loving her is like loving a thunderstorm or a wildfire. Mountains don't care about thunderstorms or wildfires, she said. Maggie looks a lot like her. I'm more like you. She pressed herself against my chest. I think we could be the calm at the center of their storm. She looked up at me. I want you to be our dad, Mac. I never thought we'd find someone like you. And Bree, too. Her voice cracked a little. We were so scared and alone. Mac, do you have room in your life for girls like us? I hugged her tighter. In my heart, Stokely, there's always been a place for you and Maggie. I've wanted someone like you to love me. For years, I didn't think I'd ever have this. Bree never showed any interest in having kids. And I think you girls turned her world upside down just like you did mine. I've seen the way she looks at you. It's like she woke up one day and realized she loves being a mother. You've changed her. You were right about her, she admitted. She's amazing. It's overwhelming sometimes. She makes a decision and you just get pulled along. I laughed. That's always been Bree. The first time I met her, I went to an amusement park with some college friends. She decided I was going to be her ride buddy. I'd actually gone because I liked another girl, but Bree dragged me away, and we never saw the rest of the group. We were 20, and I fell in love with her that day. She's like a virus. She invades your life and takes over. We had our first fight a month after we got married. What did you fight about? She asked. You're going to think this is silly. It was about shoes. She kept moving mine and putting hers in their place. I had to dig through her stuff to find mine. She thinks I'm obsessive. She's probably right. But is it too much to ask that she keep her shoes on her side of the closet? She exploded. And then I started driving her crazy, and she drove me crazy. I like to have a plan, and she's totally spontaneous. It's just who she is. I love that about her, but it also drives me nuts. She loves that I'm organized, but it drives her nuts. And those differences just kept clashing. Stokely giggled. Maggie and I fight about stuff like that too. She's always losing things, and then she just decides on the spur of the moment what we're going to do. I think we need to change a little, Mac. We need to go with the flow more. But they need to change too. They need to understand we like things in their place. Do you think we can figure this out? I don't know, I admitted. Bree and I never had a reason to try. Our relationship is weird. I love her more now than when we were married, and I think she feels the same. But she's not one to talk about it. She just does things. We're closer now than we ever were when we were married. I like her better now. Back then I loved her, but we were always angry. We got to a point where we didn't need to change, but I think we were too immature and selfish. Maybe you and Maggie made us realize what we were missing. The idea of being a family is exciting, but also terrifying. What if we screw it up? We could lose everything. I hate that kind of risk. I know, but sometimes you have to take a chance, she said. You can't get anything good without risking that it might go wrong. I hugged her, and she snuggled against me. You're the wisest 11-year-old I've ever met, I said. I'll be 12 next month, she replied. We finished the bun and headed back home. The others were still asleep, so we took Grandma for a walk. By the time we returned, the sleepyheads were up. Bree and Maggie, never morning people, looked like groggy, beautiful cats, stretching and yawning. After their showers, they were like new, full of energy. Bree whisked us away to get our marriage license, file for adoption, and start temporary custody. Later, we had seafood for dinner, and the girls couldn't stop raving about the food and prices. Wow, Mac, you must make a lot of money, Maggie said. I chuckled. I make about $90,000 a year, which is more than enough to support us. But Bree? She makes 10 times more. They stared at her in shock. Bree laughed. It's just money. The point is, we can treat you girls whenever you want. And honestly, Mac cooks better than most restaurants. You cook? Maggie asked. Bree nodded. Yes, but simple things. Anyone can follow a recipe, but this guy, he's a genius in the kitchen. She's pretty good too, I added. If only she could stay focused. Bree playfully hit me. Make one mistake and he'll never let it go, she joked. I grinned. In our first year, she burnt food so badly, not even the dog would eat it. She'd take it outside and leave it under a tree, like some kind of burnt offering. Everyone laughed. Bree, in a great mood, snuggled up to me and the girls giggled. We've never eaten anywhere this nice, Maggie said. Bree gave her a serious look. Maggie, say it again with confidence. Maggie smiled, straightened up, and repeated herself with pride. Bree grinned. See, we may be from Detroit, but we've got class. The girls beamed, clearly proud. Over time, Bree taught them everything, from how to dress to how to walk, talk, and carry themselves. In just 6 months, they went from street smart to sophisticated, excelling in everything they did. That night, Bree was excited. Back home, she told the girls, "Turn on the TV and leave it on all night." They laughed, knowing what was coming next. She grabbed my hand and led me to the bedroom. "We're celebrating tonight," she said with a mischievous smile. "What are we celebrating?" I asked. "The start of something incredible," she whispered. "I love you, Mac. I'll remind you of that every night and show you just how special we are. Tonight, we take it to a new level. Ready?" "Show me," I said, feeling the heat between us. With a smile, she let her fiery red hair down. A rare sight. Her hair fell in waves down her back, making her even more irresistible. She turned, her eyes gleaming. "Unzip me," she murmured. I slowly unzipped her dress, feeling the tension build as the fabric slid off her shoulders. She stood before me in high heels and a lacy white bra, arching her back slightly, more stunning than ever. Bree always exuded confidence, but tonight was different. She radiated sensuality as she dropped her bra and teased, "Looks like you're overdressed." "And what are we going to do about that?" I asked, my voice full of anticipation. She moved closer, her body flowing smoothly, and gently pushed me onto the bed. Kneeling beside my hips, she unbuttoned my shirt, slipping it off and briefly trapping my arms before tossing it aside. With skilled hands, she undid my belt and pants, pulling them down along with my socks and shoes. I lay there, fully exposed, overwhelmed by her intensity. This wasn't just physical. It was Bree at her most vulnerable. We made love, and afterward, I felt a new depth in our connection. She looked at me, her eyes soft but full of emotion. "Mac, I love you," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been selfish, never really giving myself to anyone until now. Do you want me? I'm ready to be your friend, lover, wife, and a mother to the girls. Will you help me? Be patient with me. You'll never regret it." I kissed her deeply. "I love you more than anything. You'll need to be patient with me too. We're a team, and we can do this together." "I'll do anything for you and the girls," she whispered. "I'm scared I'll be a bad mom. I've always feared it. That's why I never wanted kids." "I don't know how to be a father either," I laughed. "But I think we'll figure it out." "I don't know how to be a good wife," she admitted. "We messed up before." "I know," I agreed. "But it wasn't all you." "It was," she said. "I was immature, but I'll try to grow up." "Me too," I said, holding her close. Eventually, we drifted off to sleep. The next morning, we showered together, laughing and teasing. Afterward, Bree put on her pajamas, glowing with happiness. "What's going on?" I asked. "We'll have guests soon," she said with a sly smile. I shrugged, put on some clothes, and sure enough, there was a knock at the door. Stokely burst in, followed by the family dog, and soon Maggie joined too. We had a playful wrestling match, with the dog winning, of course. After a while, we all headed out for breakfast. Later, Bree announced we had an appointment. "Where?" I asked, suspicious. "You'll see," she said with a grin. We drove to the courthouse, and as we entered, I started to understand. "Do you have business here?" I asked. "Yes, a very important case," she laughed. Inside, Bree knelt down and pulled a small box from her purse. "Mac, will you marry me again?" she asked, her voice confident. "This time, it's forever. I never stopped loving you, and I want to be your wife again." She held our old wedding rings along with her engagement ring. "Brianna, are you sure?" I asked, my heart racing. "I've never been more sure," she replied. "Girls, help me out. He's so stubborn." "Yes, please, Mac," they begged. "We want to be a family. We love you and Bree." How could I resist? In about 10 minutes, we were married again. To celebrate, Bree took us to a new Greek restaurant. As I sat there, looking at Bree, the girls, and our future, I felt my life unfolding. The most beautiful woman was my wife, and I had 2 amazing daughters who were growing up fast. Their happiness filled me with joy. Could we make this work? Only time would tell. It took a month to get custody of the girls. Bree worked tirelessly, and when it finally happened, they were the happiest I'd ever seen them. And so were we. Bree sold her apartment and moved in with me. I worried about us getting on each other's nerves, but it went better than I expected. A few weeks after the wedding, Bree forgot to call us after a dinner with a client. When she came home, we were all waiting. Stokely held up the phone, and Bree immediately realized her mistake. Without saying a word, she burst into tears. dropping to her knees in front of us. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I forgot to call. I'll do my best not to let it happen again." Her apology was a turning point. Bree rarely apologized, so this showed real growth. Stokely hugged her first, then Maggie, and finally, I joined them. "It's okay, we understand," I said. From that moment, Bree and I made more effort to make each other happy, and the girls were great at helping us. We had small disagreements, but I'd never felt more content. Bree enrolled the girls in the private school where I taught, and we grew closer during our daily rides together. They shared their thoughts, dreams, and worries, filling my life with energy. After school, they'd do their homework, and then we'd walk the dog before dinner. Dinner was usually at 5, and Bree would join us around 6:30. If she was running late, she'd call, and we'd go out for dinner instead. When Maggie turned 16, she only wanted one thing: her driver's license. She studied hard and passed on her first try. The night before her birthday, Bree casually brought up a new idea in bed. "I want to buy Maggie a car," she said. "Okay, what kind?" I asked. "A new Camaro convertible," she said with a gleam in her eye. "How much will that cost?" I asked. "Mac, does it really matter?" she replied, rolling her eyes. "Do you think we're going broke?" "No, I'd just like to know," I chuckled. "Sorry," she smiled, kissing me. "I think it'll be about $60,000. I whistled. "That's a lot for a car." "She deserves it," Bree said softly. "Yes, she does," I agreed. We ordered the car, a bright yellow Camaro with black stripes and a sleek black interior. Bree insisted on getting the big V8 engine, thinking it would hold its value better. And although I had some reservations, she was probably right. When the car arrived, we parked it in the garage and waited until Maggie's birthday morning. The next day, as usual, the girls grabbed their bags and followed me to the car for school. Bree was already in the garage, but I hadn't unlocked the doors. "Dad, let us in," Stokely said, sounding confused. "You're not riding with me today," I said teasingly. Maggie looked puzzled. "You're driving, Maggie," I said, holding out the keys. "Mom's not going to work?" Maggie asked, still not catching on. "No," I said, motioning toward the garage. "She's leaving. But what are you going to drive?" Maggie looked confused, and then I pressed the garage door opener. As the door lifted, her new Camaro came into view. Her big green eyes widened in shock. They both stood still, speechless. Suddenly, Maggie started crying, tears streaming down her face as she trembled, unable to speak. I jumped out of the car, and Bree rushed over, wrapping her arms around Maggie. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, worried. "We thought you'd be happy. This is your car. It's for your birthday." Maggie buried her face in Bree's chest, crying too hard to answer. Stokely hugged her too, and we stood there holding Maggie until she could calm down enough to talk. Finally, Maggie whispered, "I don't need a car. I love you both so much, and this is too much. Stokely and I already talked about it. We don't need anything. We just need you to love us." I kissed her cheek. "We love you so much, Maggie," Bree said, her voice shaking. "We love you both more than anything in the world. Having you in our lives is a dream come true. We love giving you things because it makes us happy to see you happy. It's one of the ways we show our love." Now Stokely was crying too. I hugged them both. "Let's go check out the car," I said gently. "At least take a look." They wiped their tears and let us lead them to the garage. I opened the driver's door for Maggie, and Bree opened the passenger side for Stokely. Maggie put her hands on the steering wheel, smiling through her tears. "It suits you," I told her softly. "Go ahead, start it up." Maggie turned the key, and the V8 engine roared to life. Both girls giggled through their tears, excitement starting to take over. I knocked on the window, and Maggie rolled it down. I leaned in and kissed her forehead. "See you at school," I said with a grin. She drove out of the garage and stopped just outside the driveway. Then she suddenly ran back, throwing herself into our arms, kissing us over and over. "I love you so much," she cried. "Thank you. You're the best mom and dad ever." She ran back to the car, and they drove off, the engine rumbling. I turned to Bree, and she was crying too. Somehow, I realized I had tears running down my face as well. "Look at us," I said, laughing through my tears. "You'd think we were the ones turning 16. "It was a great idea, Bree. You're incredible," I said, hugging her tightly. For Stokely's 16th birthday, we did the same thing. It wasn't quite as emotional as Maggie's, but it was still a special moment. The girls were growing up fast, and our family was stronger than ever. We took them on trips to Hawaii and Belize, celebrated their achievements, and watched them grow into amazing young women. When Maggie graduated from high school, she was already well into her college studies. The day Stokely started college, I came home to find Bree sitting on the couch, crying. I sat down beside her and wrapped my arms around her. We sat in silence for a while, just holding each other. Eventually, Bree looked up at me, her blue eyes full of tears. "Our kids are grown up, Mac," she whispered. "I know," I replied, kissing her gently. "That's what kids do." She cupped my face in her hands, looking deeply into my eyes. "Let's have another one, Mac," she said, her voice trembling. "This time, just you and me. I want a baby, Mac." She broke down, crying harder. "I never thought I'd want this. I love you so much, and I miss them so much already. I want to do it again. It was so amazing. I know they're only 60 miles away, but I miss them." "I miss them too, kitten," I whispered, holding her close. "Maybe we should start practicing if we're serious about this baby." Bree gasped, looking up at me with wide eyes. "Really? You mean it? You want a baby?" "Of course," I said, smiling. "I hope it's a red-haired girl just like you. I love you with all my heart, Bree." I picked her up and carried her through the empty house to our bedroom, ready to start the next chapter of our lives. We had to kick Granville out of the room, but that didn't matter. We were building something new, something beautiful. As I drifted off to sleep, my eyes landed on the picture of Maggie and Stokely on the nightstand. They didn't look like strangers anymore. They looked like family.
Caught my cheating wife and her sister's husband in a shocking act, leading to an explosive revenge. The internet changed how we lived. Suddenly, everyone wanted a computer, including my family. We finally got one a couple of years back. Initially, it was a novelty. My wife used it for email and games, while the kids used it for homework and gaming. I browsed the web and watched adult content. I often worked late, leaving the factory at midnight. Unlike many guys, I headed straight home. Alone in the quiet house, I'd sit at the computer. Eventually, I got bored and started reading stories online. I became intrigued by tales of infidelity. These stories made me suspicious of my wife. I started scrutinizing her behavior, even arguing with her. Despite her reassurances, I couldn't shake my doubts. I read less over time, but the thoughts lingered. I even wondered about my own reactions if I caught her cheating. Would it turn me on? Discussing this with Deb only led to more questions. Our relationship had begun innocently enough, but doubt crept in. Deb's sister Sandy had a reputation for promiscuity. Though I'd been wild in my youth too, Sandy's behavior was on another level. Her carnal exploits were well known, including involvement in ménage à trois. I knew Bob from work. He was a day shift supervisor who got transferred. He invited me to his wedding with Sandy, who was just as wild as him. I wasn't fond of Bob because of his behavior toward Deb. Despite Deb's reassurances, I made it clear I'd protect her from him. We agreed to keep our past relationships private due to jealousy. Our conflicting work schedules strained our marriage. I didn't want to encounter someone Deb had slept with, nor did I want to admit I had been with her sister when our kids were young. Despite our differences, we managed to get along, though we didn't see each other much. Deb asked me to fix Sandy's leaking sink, knowing Bob was useless with repairs. I promised to take care of it on my way to work. While I worked, thoughts of Sandy's lifestyle as a possible wanton lingered, fueled by Bob's revelations. Despite Sandy's advances, I joked to keep things light. She didn't tempt me enough to risk my marriage. Arriving at Sandy's house, she greeted me provocatively. As I fixed the clog caused by eggshells and potato peels, Sandy hovered nearby, emphasizing her availability. "What are you doing, Sandy?" "I want you to stop it," I said. "I'm trying to finish this job." She paused briefly, allowing me to complete the task. When I stood up, she persisted. "Are you going to sleep with me now?" "No, Sandy, I can't do that. Deb is your sister and I love her. I won't cheat on her, especially not with her sister." "Have you forgotten how it was in high school? Are you too good to sleep with me now?" "Sandy, please. I love Deb. She doesn't know about our past together unless you tell her. You're a beautiful woman. But I love Deb." "You foolish man. Either you'll sleep with me or I'll tell Deb you did it anyway. She'll believe me. After all, I'm her sister. Why are you doing this? Why hurt us? Deb is your sister and she loves you." Sandy laughed. "My innocent sister thinks she's perfect. Let's see how she reacts when I spill the truth." "Sandy, don't do this. I won't have sex with you, and I'll tell Deb about our past in school. I know she'll understand." Grabbing my tools, I declared, "I'm finished with your sink. I left in my truck, my mind racing. Would Sandy lie to Deb? At work, I tried calling Deb, but she wasn't home. I left a message expressing my love and the need to talk about her sister. The day dragged on with my thoughts consumed by the impending conversation. By evening, I called home again, but no one answered. Deb had left with Sandy and Bob, leaving the kids with me. I decided to keep them overnight. Is something wrong? Ray asked Deb's mom. No, it's okay. If you see her, tell her I love her, and I'll see her tonight. I have to get back to work. For me, it was one of the longest nights. I knew I had to confess about Sandy before I met Deb. Finally, my workday ended, and I headed home, bracing myself for the inevitable conversation. Pulling up to the house, I noticed Sandy's car parked in the driveway, signaling an imminent confrontation. Unlocking the door, I was met with a shocking sight: my wife, Deb, Bob, and Sandy in compromising positions. Anger surged through me as chaos erupted. Waking up in the hospital, I found Patrolman G. Andrews by my side, explaining the events that had led to my injury. Confusion clouded my mind as I tried to make sense of the situation. I see you're conscious now. I'm Patrolman G. Andrews. Where am I? And where's my wife? What happened? Take it easy, Mr. Harper. You have a concussion from a blow to the head with a glass vase. There was a fight at your home, and though charges were initially considered, they've been dropped. You're lucky. It could have meant 18 months in jail. What about the attack on me? Witnesses say you were in a scuffle with your brother-in-law when his wife intervened, hitting you with the vase to stop the fight. It was a single blow to halt the altercation. You should be grateful the charges were dismissed. Where was my wife during all this? When we arrived, she was ill from excessive drinking. According to your sister-in-law, you became upset with her, leading to a confrontation with your brother-in-law, who was trying to protect her. Your wife doesn't recall much, only that there was shouting. If the charges are dropped, why are you here? My supervisor called when you weren't home yet and instructed me to wait for your statement. So what happened? I asked. I have nothing to say. I wasn't going to broadcast that I found my wife with another man. I just lay there and said nothing. Okay, it's your call. The doctor says you'll need to stay until tomorrow. Consider yourself fortunate no charges were pressed. You're lucky, Mr. Harper. The officer departed, leaving me with a pounding headache. What now? I couldn't bear the thought of living with a cheating wife, but I needed answers. I phoned my sister to pick me up the next day. I couldn't rely on Deb, not after this. As I waited for Amy to arrive, the phone rang. It was Deb. Should I come get you? We need to talk. Now that we're square. Square? What are you talking about? You cheated with Bob and you think we're even? Amy's on her way. I just want to grab my things and go. What do you mean leave? I was just evening the score for what you did, Deb retorted. I'm not discussing this over the phone. Amy and I will come to pick up my things, and we can talk then. I hung up and waited for Amy. She arrived shortly and drove to my house. I asked her to wait in the car to avoid any conflict. Knocking on the door, Deb answered. I inquired about the kids, and she mentioned they were at her mom's. Beginning the conversation, I addressed her response to my message. Did you listen to my voicemail? Yes, Sandy claimed you coerced her into having sex. How could you? I didn't do that. That's why I left the message. I went to fix her plumbing, and she made advances. I refused, but she persisted, threatening to lie to you about us. I don't believe you. She wouldn't lie to me. She's envious of our marriage and wanted to break us apart. Letting Bob sleep with you was part of their swinging lifestyle. They got what they wanted and our marriage suffered. No, that's false. I did it for revenge. You assaulted my sister, so I slept with Bob to even the score. Sandy even knew physical details about you, like your uncircumcised state and the mole on your upper thigh. Your sister is promiscuous. She knew because I was involved with her in high school, like many others. I kept it from you because I liked you and didn't want to jeopardize our relationship. Then you said we should bury our past. I'm unsure what to believe. Sandy is my sister, and you're my husband. Instead of asking me, you let Bob, did you really think raping your sister would fix things? You must have wanted him badly to believe them. But Sandy's claims, I don't care what your sister says. It's not just about Bob. It's about you not trusting me enough to discuss the accusations. If I had assaulted her, why didn't she report it? She didn't want to cause a family scandal. But she had no qualms about involving the police last night. She didn't cry assault because it didn't happen. You can believe whoever, but this marriage is over. Why would you want to be with a rapist? No, you desired Bob and used me as an excuse. That's not true. I love you. Look up love. It doesn't involve sleeping with others. I'll grab my things now and see you next week for the rest. I'm consulting a lawyer Monday to start the divorce process. Ray, hold on. This isn't how it was planned. Sandy said she forgave you and you'd forgive me. I only wanted revenge. No, you slept with Bob and your sister. I grabbed my suitcase, packing a few things. What about the kids? Tell them what you want, I'm done with this. I'll arrange visits through a lawyer, and Amy can help with the kids. I don't want to speak to you again. I left. Amy drove me to a budget motel. On the way, I told her everything. She knew I was truthful. Weeks passed. It was tough. I worked extra for expenses, found a cheap place and ate out mostly. In the divorce, assets were split equally. Child support didn't bother me. I love my kids. I missed Deb, but I knew it was over. I attended school events, avoiding Deb's family. I saw my kids weekly. Deb called often. I listened about the kids but hung up when she brought up us. I visited Amy's for dinner and played with the kids. Sandy stuck to her story, leaving Deb torn. I had no proof. It was my word against Sandy's. Deb believed her, which hurt the most. One afternoon, the school called saying Kyle wasn't well. I fetched him and found he had a cold. I informed Deb, who taught middle school, and she said she'd come home soon. After checking Kyle's temperature, which was slightly elevated, I waited with him. An hour later, Debbie arrived. As she went to check on Kyle, the phone rang. Without thinking, I answered it was Sandy. "What are you doing there?" she asked. "Well, look who's calling the shots. Kyle was sick, so I brought him home." "Thanks for ruining our marriage." I recorded the conversation, forgetting the answering machine was on. "Is he okay? Why do you care? You're the reason his parents split." "Ray, things got out of hand. You knew we were wanton, and Bob wanted your wife. If you had just slept with me, none of this would have happened. But instead, you came home and started a fight. You accused me of assault and made Bob assault Deb. What kind of sister are you? Bob didn't force her. She willingly slept with him, and she'd probably do it again. She was drunk, and you filled her head with lies, then watched your husband violate her. Ray, you can't prove anything. I warned you Deb would believe me. If you need some action, call me. Tell Deb to ring me later. Hope Kyle feels better." She hung up, and I turned off the recorder. Debbie asked who called, and I told her it was Sandy, her angel sister who never lies. "What'd she want?" Deb asked. I recorded her message. She said to call her back. "See you in court Thursday." "I guess it's our Freedom Day." "Don't forget to listen to the message," I said, heading to my truck. My phone rang persistently on the way home about 10 times. When I finally answered, it was Debbie, apologizing, claiming Sandy told her the truth about not being assaulted. "Good to know, but it doesn't change my mind. You slept with Bob without giving me a chance to explain. Despite telling you the truth, you chose your sister's tale, thinking I was a rapist. I loved you, maybe always will, but I also hate you for what you did to our family and the distrust you had for me." On Thursday, I took 2 days off work, signed the divorce petition at my attorney's office, and left before Deb arrived. Depressed, I went to the neighborhood bar where I saw Bob. Without hesitation, I punched him repeatedly until I was pulled away by others. Dragged off by the police, I was taken to jail. I made one call, reaching out to my sister Amy. I confessed my actions and insisted she shouldn't post bail. I'd face my sentence. Tears flowed when we hung up. Debbie tried to visit me in prison, but I declined to see her. Nearly 2 months later, my case went to court. I pleaded guilty to assault and received a 2-year sentence, minus time served. Amy stored my belongings, informing me that Debbie was unwell and wished to see me. I refused. Deb truly loves you. Her family is furious about Sandy's accusations. Also, Debbie never showed up to sign the divorce papers, so legally you're still married, Amy informed me. Prison life was harsh, fights were routine, and I had to earn respect. My cellmate, Keeler, was a lifer with a violent past. Despite our rough start, he eventually opened up to me. Then, surprisingly, Debbie visited me one day. "What brings you here?" I questioned, feigning anger, though she looked lovely and tender. "Ray, I still love you. I've made mistakes," she confessed, offering me photos of our kids, tears streaming down her face. "I've moved on. Take care of our kids," I replied, receiving the pictures. "I didn't finalize the divorce. I'll wait for you, no matter how long," she pleaded. I felt torn. Despite her mistakes, I still loved her. Leaving her by the window, I walked back to my cell. In the kitchen, I overheard plans to confront Keeler. Without being a snitch, I informed him, hoping to save a life. The next day, unsure if Keeler believed me, I stood my ground. He assured me he'd handle it discreetly, earning my gratitude. He concealed 2 books under his shirt, shielding his kidneys. Across from him, 3 allies sat at a nearby table. As the attacker approached and lunged with a knife, Keeler remained composed. The blade struck the books, its dullness preventing penetration. Keeler's comrade subdued the assailant until guards intervened. The attacker was isolated, while Keeler resumed his meal unfazed. It was astonishing how Keeler remained composed. He confided in me regularly after the incident. Despite his tough exterior, he was a different person behind bars. Keeler inquired about my family, sharing his own story of estrangement. His daughter, Angie, remained loyal, though he protected her from prison life. He cherished her deeply, proud of her career as a lawyer. I recounted my ordeal with Sandy and Debbie to Keeler. "Do you still love her?" he asked. "Yes, but I can't forgive her," I replied. Keeler urged me not to hold on to grudges, sharing his own regrets. His words left me pondering my future upon release. Without a job or family, what would I do? The following month, Debbie visited me again, her eyes teary but smiling. She handed me drawings from the kids, portraying us as a family. "They miss you, Ray, and I miss you terribly. Can you forgive me? Can we rebuild our family? I've cut ties with Sandy and Bob. I regret not trusting you," she confessed. Doubt lingered. Would she believe me if faced with accusations again? "Deb, I want to forgive you, but it's hard. Seeing you with Bob is etched in my mind. Did you have feelings for him?" "No, I despised it. I felt sick when you walked in. I regret my actions deeply. I only want you, Ray, the father of our children," she pleaded. Weeks later, Amy visited with unsettling news. "I saw Sandy and Bob together at the house. I don't know why. I thought you should know." Confusion swirled. Had Deb lied again? I was ready to forgive, but now I doubted her honesty. I needed to understand why Deb was reconnecting with Sandy and Bob. A month later, Keeler and I spoke, and he expressed gratitude for my past help. A former lawyer, he offered to leverage his connections to potentially secure my release from parole. Though uncertain, I trusted him. Keeler's integrity stood firm, despite his criminal background. I respected his stature and refrained from probing further, choosing to accept his word. A few weeks later, I was summoned to the warden's office for the parole board meeting. The prison governor was the first to address me. "Mr. Harper, we have a parole application for you. After reviewing your file, we noted your initial struggle to adjust. Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir. I found prison life challenging, but I tried to adapt." "If released early, where would you live and work?" the governor asked. I had to think quickly, realizing the importance of my response. "Well, sir, my sister and her husband offered me a place to stay, and my previous employer expressed willingness to rehire me." "Aren't you married, Mr. Harper?" "Yes, sir, but we were in the process of divorce when I was sentenced. I'm uncertain about our future." "We appreciate your candor. We knew about your marital status and wanted to gauge your honesty. Regarding recidivism, we're cautious about early releases. I assure you I'm committed to staying out of prison. Return to your cell, Mr. Harper. We'll notify you of our decision by month's end." "Thank you, sir, for considering my parole." Back in the cell, Keeler inquired about the meeting. I shared my responses and asked if he had any involvement. "You never know, but if you're released early, I'll expect a weekly box of cigarettes on my account." He chuckled. A few days later, Debbie returned, mentioning a parole board representative had visited. "Are you getting paroled?" she inquired anxiously. "What did they say?" I nervously questioned. "They asked about our living arrangements and if you'd be staying here," she replied, adding, "I'd love to have you back." Changing the subject, I queried about her interactions with Sandy and Bob. "She's my sister. I don't see her much," she responded defensively. "And Bob?" I pressed. "Why all the questions?" she retorted, visibly uneasy. "You promised not to see Sandy, yet they were here together. Did something happen with Bob again?" "Tell him when I'm out, I'll settle things. And if you're having fun with him in the meantime, I'll deal with it," I asserted. Deb hastily exited the room, confirming my suspicions. I phoned my sister Amy, informing her of the encounter. She assured me of her support. "Did the parole board contact Mr. Parker about my job?" I inquired. "Yes, they did. He said you could return. You were one of his top employees," she reassured. "You've given me hope," I acknowledged gratefully. "They mentioned I'm likely to be released next month, considering I have a place to live and a job," she added tearfully. Amy's words buoyed my spirits. I received a call informing me of my upcoming release next week. They provided the name of the lawyer handling my case and instructed me to report to the agency promptly after my release. It puzzled me why I had to meet with a lawyer instead of a parole officer. However, I learned that the law firm facilitated my release, handling paperwork, explaining my parole terms, and arranging a meeting with a parole officer. I expressed gratitude to Keeler, remembering our agreement about the cigarettes. Regardless of his involvement in my parole, the prospect of freedom was worth a weekly box of cigarettes. As I stepped outside the gate, my sister Amy awaited me, tearfully. We shared a hug and a brotherly kiss. Inside Amy's house, her husband welcomed me warmly. Amy mentioned that Debbie, after consulting with a lawyer while I was incarcerated, had initiated the divorce proceedings. It seemed my suspicions about Deb were confirmed, yet now I was a free man. Knowing I needed to arrange visitation with my kids, I called Deb's house beforehand to ensure she was available. I clarified that I sought no trouble and suggested we discuss arrangements on her porch. Reluctantly, she agreed, warning of involving the police if there was any disturbance. As I arrived at the house, my children rushed to me, shouting, "Daddy, Daddy, you're back!" I embraced them tightly, feeling the depth of my longing for them. After a brief chat, I urged them to ride their bikes, recalling how their mother and I used to watch them from the porch. "Debbie, these kids are mine too. I want to be a part of their lives," I asserted, frustrated by her dismissive attitude. I was willing to forgive. But you went back to Bob and Sandy." "I won't tolerate exposing my children to their lifestyle," I warned sternly, emphasizing the seriousness of my intent. Debbie insisted she wouldn't subject the kids to that lifestyle and claimed she had changed. "Actions speak louder than words," I reminded her skeptically. After bidding my kids farewell, I discussed their well-being and promised to spend more time with them once I found a nearby apartment. As I left, a sense of unease settled over me, knowing I needed legal guidance in this complex situation. I hadn't spoken to the lawyer who secured my parole. Approaching the receptionist, I presented the card from the parole board. "May I see Mr. A.J. Brady, please? I have an appointment." "I'm Ray Harper," I stated. The receptionist assured me Brady would see me shortly and directed me to take a seat. While waiting, I wondered if she had said, "Miss Brady." The card indicated a J. Brady, so I assumed it was a man. Lost in thought, I was taken aback when a stunning woman in a dark blue suit approached. She greeted me with a smile, dimples, and shoulder-length dark hair. As she extended her hand for a handshake, she introduced herself as a J. Brady. "Ray Harper, I presume?" she said. "I've been asked to review your case. From what I've gathered, you didn't receive fair representation. Let's discuss further in my office," she added, instructing the receptionist to hold calls. "Yes, Miss Brady," the receptionist responded. I followed her into her office. If she had asked, I would have followed her anywhere. She was strikingly beautiful. "Well, Mr. Harper, we finally meet," she said. "Please call me Ray," I replied gratefully. "I owe you my life, but I'm curious, why me?" "A friend of mine asked me to look into your case," she explained. "Your lawyer failed to mention key details like your recent divorce and extenuating circumstances. I presented these to the parole board, who agreed your sentence was excessive." "Why me, Miss Brady? Who hired you? Can I call you a J?" I inquired. "Look, Ray, a friend asked for my help, and I delivered. Knowing who hired me isn't crucial, and yes, you can call me a J," she replied. "There are some things we need to discuss," she added. "Would you join me for lunch?" I asked. "I don't usually meet clients outside the office," she replied. "It's not a date, just lunch," I clarified. "All right, Ray, let's call it a business meeting over lunch," she agreed, flashing a smile. "I'll let Mary know we're leaving, and then we can go." I watched her rise. She exuded a rare blend of charm and professionalism for a lawyer. We dined at a tranquil restaurant. Over lunch, she briefed me on meeting my parole officer, regular visits, adherence to rules, and staying clear of trouble. "Angie, share something about yourself," I requested. "Ray, discussing my personal life with a client wouldn't be appropriate," she responded. "Your smile is captivating," I complimented, prompting her to blush. "Tell me about your legal background," I persisted. She revealed her scholarship, acquired law degree, and experience in criminal law. As we ate, Angie lingered in my thoughts. "Will I see you again?" I inquired. "Return next week for paperwork with your parole officer. We can have lunch then," she agreed, softening slightly. After lunch, we returned to the office. When she extended her hand, I held it briefly, pondering her thoughts. We bid farewell, and I eagerly anticipated our next lunch. Her secretary's smile hinted at the rarity of such interactions, a testament to Angie's uniqueness. I returned to work, swiftly completing tasks as if it were second nature. My colleagues seemed to regard me with newfound respect, and no one dared to challenge me. For 2 consecutive Mondays, I met with Angie, initially maintaining a professional relationship. However, by the 4th week, she informed me that our business collaboration had ceased. "Are you still my lawyer?" I inquired. "Certainly. Call me if you encounter any issues," she assured. "Angie, I regret to inform you that I must terminate our arrangement," I confessed. "Terminate, after all I've done to assist you?" she exclaimed. "Yes. I desire more than a professional connection. I want to take you on a genuine date, get to know you better," I expressed. "Ray, I'm conflicted. There's an attraction, but what will people think?" she pondered. "I don't care about perceptions. Just join me once. If it doesn't feel right, we won't repeat it." "Let's follow our hearts," I urged. After hesitation, she reluctantly agreed. I'll go, but don't expect anything more, she cautioned. Surprised by her own words, Angie agreed. On Saturday, we took a drive. I borrowed a car from my sister, opting not to use my old truck. Arriving at her townhouse, I was greeted by a stunning woman as she opened the door. Despite individual perceptions, to me, she appeared breathtaking. Resisting the urge to embrace her immediately, I reminded myself to act as a gentleman, though it wasn't easy. At a fancy restaurant, we enjoyed wine followed by dinner. Afterward, we conversed while listening to music. Angie, tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up? I noticed your last name differs from your father's, I inquired. You know my story, Ray. My parents' relationship was troubled, ending in my father's incarceration for the past 14 years. Raised by extended family, I, the youngest, was only 14 when it all unfolded. It was a difficult time. Despite loving him, my siblings couldn't forgive our father for his actions. I harbored guilt for revealing my mother's infidelity to him. Perhaps if I had stayed silent, things might have been different, Angie confessed. Angie, you shouldn't blame yourself for your mom's deceit or your dad's imprisonment. You were just a child trying to do the right thing, I reassured her. After my father was incarcerated, I resolved to attend college and pursue a career in law, hoping to assist him with a lighter sentence. That's why I specialized in criminal law. Despite my efforts, there wasn't much I could do for him, Angie explained. As for your question about my marital status, I wasn't married long, and it's not something I want to discuss, she replied with a smile. Ray, can we table this conversation for another time? I'm enjoying our evening together, and I'd rather not dwell on these topics. Would you like to dance? She suggested. I'm not much of a dancer, but I'd love to hold you close, I responded. As we danced, I embraced Angie, cherishing the moment. Ray, I have trust issues, especially with men, due to my social circles. I'm just being upfront with you. If it weren't for my father's intervention, I might not have agreed to this date, Angie admitted. I'll make sure to send your father some extra cigarettes, I joked. Angie, you mean a lot to me, and I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust. If I overstep, just let me know, and I'll respect your boundaries, I promised. When I dropped her off that night, I kissed her at the door, leaving her in silence. She kissed me again and leaned back. Can I come in, Angie? Not today, Ray. It's too soon. Maybe next Saturday. That could work. Give me a call on Thursday. I returned home filled with happiness. We got together the next 2 Saturdays. During our time together, she opened up more. Ray, I want you to know me better if we're going to keep seeing each other. I won't hide anything. I've been married before, as I mentioned. It happened during my freshman year of college. My boyfriend and I thought we were in love, so we got married after I got pregnant. But we soon realized we were too young, and the marriage failed. I had a miscarriage, and we ended up divorcing. I kept the last name Brady to distance myself from my maiden name, Miller, as my father insisted. I felt relieved that she trusted me with her story. She asked about my kids, expressing interest in meeting them. I had already told them about her, and my daughter was eager to meet her. Angie, would you like to join us? My sister is hosting a family barbecue next Saturday, and you're invited. It would mean a lot to me if you came. I knew it was a significant step for us. She avoided eye contact, indicating she understood the importance of this invitation. After a deep breath, she looked at me and kissed me passionately, a first for us. Pulling back, she took another breath. Okay, Ray, I'll come. What can I bring? I wasn't sure what women typically brought to these gatherings, so I suggested Amy could discuss it with her. When I informed Amy about Angie attending the party, the guest list expanded. Everyone wanted to meet her. My parents, cousins, aunts, and uncles all showed up. Angie offered to make potato salad. Amy mentioned how sweet Angie sounded on the phone, hinting at her hopes for our relationship. Every weekend, I visited Deb's house to pick up my kids. We'd either hang out at Amy's or do something fun together. I asked about their mother respectfully. Kyle mentioned she was dating a man, which concerned me initially, but Kayla reassured me he was their school teacher named Pat. He had lost his wife to leukemia and had moved to start anew. He had a daughter their age, whom Kyle and Kayla liked. I need to tell you something, Deb. Your deceit and infidelity destroyed us. If you value this man, treat him right. Most importantly, be truthful with him. Don't repeat the same mistakes you made with us.
Pat cares for our children and treats them well.
He's aware of your existence and acknowledges you as their father. I hope things work out for us. I hope I haven't tarnished your future relationships, Ray. You're a decent man, and I believe you'll find the right partner. I'm just sorry for the pain I caused you, Deb said, sounding sincere. After bidding farewell, I drove home. I rented a small apartment about a mile from Deb and the kids. I opted for a 2-bedroom place so the kids would have a spot when they were with me. I still swung by Amy's a couple of times a week, usually for a meal, but I enjoyed visiting them too. As the barbecue day arrived, I felt anxious. Waiting outside, I felt immense relief seeing Angie's car pull up. She greeted me with a smile, offering a bowl of potato salad. "Make sure to have some," she teased. She looked stunning. I couldn't see her any other way. Being with her made me feel elated. I realized I had fallen for her, even though we'd only shared kisses. Some things you just know. I hoped she felt something for me too. Introducing her as my good friend, I watched as she mingled with everyone. Mom and Dad instantly took a liking to her. Dad even quipped, "Don't let her get away, Ray. We already adore her and we barely know her." Angie glanced at me and smiled. When I introduced her to Amy, their mutual glance seemed like positive reinforcement. "Ray, I never mentioned this, but I encountered your sister during the parole interviews. I didn't bring it up as it wasn't relevant until now. I never anticipated we'd become acquaintances. I assured you of my honesty, which is why I'm disclosing this now. Amy and I hadn't communicated since your parole until she contacted me about the potato salad," Angie explained. "Have you conversed with anyone else I should be aware of?" "Yes, I've spoken to Deb, your ex-wife Sandy, and Bob naturally. Additionally, I liaised with your employer to secure your position considering those involved in the bar incident and your arrest. I handled all of this as your legal representative. I never foresaw developing feelings for you, especially without meeting. I regret not divulging this earlier, but as your attorney, I needed to ascertain the truth before fully supporting you. If you want me to depart, please say so, and I'll oblige." "Leave? Leave." All I heard was your declaration of love for me. I embraced her with a kiss, followed by a hug, and then introduced her to the rest of the family. I informed Angie I'd return shortly, as I needed to pick up the kids who were eager to meet her. Upon my return, Kayla approached and introduced herself to Angie. "Hi, I'm Kayla. Are you Daddy's girlfriend? You're really pretty, just like Daddy said." "Hi, Kayla. You can call me Angie or AJ. You're a very pretty girl too. It's really nice to meet you." Kayla then said, "Come meet my older brother. He's 10 and a bit shy around girls. Kyle, this is AJ, Daddy's friend." I observed Kyle shaking Angie's hand. She knelt down to chat with the kids at their level. The way they interacted indicated they were likely to become friends. I joined them, and Kyle, not typically talkative, told me, "We like her, Daddy. She's so pretty and sweet." Angie simply glanced at me and smiled. The barbecue was fantastic. As the evening progressed, while chatting with Angie, Kyle and Kayla approached us. "Dad, remember you mentioned going to the amusement park in 2 weeks? Can Angie come with us? That way, when Kayla and I ride the attractions, you'll have someone to talk to." I attempted to convey to Kyle that such inquiries should be made in private. Angie might have other commitments or might not enjoy amusement parks. He glanced at Angie and apologized. "Sorry, Angie. I didn't realize you weren't fond of amusement parks." Angie chuckled and knelt down, addressing Kyle. "Sweetheart, what your daddy means is that those questions are better asked to him privately, not me. As for amusement parks, I adore them and would love to go if it's all right with your daddy. Perhaps you and I can enjoy the roller coaster together." Sure enough, we all headed to the amusement park, where the kids eagerly rode every attraction. Angie kept her promise to Kyle and rode the roller coaster with him, as well as the Ferris wheel. On our way back, Kayla remarked, "Dad, you should get a car instead of your truck. Angie can't always use hers. We won't all fit in your truck." We chuckled at Kayla's observation, realizing she was correct. Over the following weeks, I didn't see much of Angie. Work kept me busy on weekends, and she had court obligations. Although we spoke on the phone occasionally, it wasn't the same. One Saturday, I picked up the kids, and we decided to visit Chuck E. Cheese's, a pizza place with various games and prizes. After arriving home, Kayla asked if she could invite Angie to join us. Not wanting to disappoint her, I agreed to call Angie. "Angie," I called out. "It's Ray. Kayla wanted me to give you a call. Any plans for tonight?" "Oh, hey, Ray. I was going out with some friends." "Oh, okay. Have a great time then." "Ray, you mentioned Kayla wanted to talk to me. Can you put her on the line, please?" "It's all right, Angie." "Sure, that'd be nice. Could you pass the phone to Kayla?" I could only hear one side of the conversation. "Hey, Angie. Dad's taking Kyle and me to Chuck E. Cheese's for pizza and games. We thought you might want to join us." "Yeah? Okay, I'll let him know. We miss you too. All right, bye." I felt bad for Kayla. "I'm sorry, honey, but Angie already has plans." "What do you mean, Dad?" "She said she'd be here in half an hour. She mentioned she's getting a car so she doesn't always have to use hers." "Yeah, Daddy. She said she misses us." Later that evening, after we returned from a pizza party where the kids won a bunch of stuffed animals thanks to Angie's skills at the games, I dropped them off at their mom's house. Angie expressed her desire for us to get to know each other better. We headed to my apartment and settled on the couch. Angie, you know I care about you, right? I wouldn't be here if I didn't. I want to be engaged with you. I haven't trusted a man in a long time. All I ask is for you to be gentle and caring. I don't want to feel used. I want to feel loved. We began on the couch and eventually moved to the bedroom, indulging in whatever pleased us. I pampered her feet with massages, licked whipped cream off her stomach, and explored every sensation. We spent hours caressing, massaging, and expressing our love. Holding her in my arms after making love was when I felt most content. It was comforting to cuddle and feel her close to me, something I hadn't experienced in a long while. She ended up staying the entire night. I rose before her and prepared French toast for us. Emerging from the bedroom, she wore one of my t-shirts, which looked particularly fetching on her. I couldn't help but express my admiration for how wonderful she looked, even in the morning. After a quick shower, we sat down to talk. Angie, what do you envision for our future? You know how much I love you, and my children and family adore you. What are your thoughts on what comes next? Ray, I feel like I'm sounding like a lawyer. We've only known each other for a few months, and last night was our first time making love. I understand it's early, but I want you in my life every day. If we haven't had our fill of love, we can return to the bedroom and spend the whole day there. Angie smiled at the suggestion. Angie, I want you to be my wife. Will you marry me? Tears welled in Angie's eyes. Ray, I want you to know I don't take love lightly. I've made mistakes before, as I've told you. Yes, I will marry you. I promise to always be there for you and the kids. I know the pain of your past marriage, and I vow to be honest and faithful. I expect the same from you. She leaned in and kissed me passionately. Honey, what's on your mind? You seem happy yet sad, I inquired. These are my reflections on my dad and how joyful he will be. Many young girls dream of their special wedding day, envisioning themselves in a white dress escorted down the aisle by their father to meet their future spouse. I realize that won't be my reality, and it saddens me deeply. She shed quiet tears. Last time, my father wasn't even aware of my wedding. By the time I reached out to him, I had suffered a miscarriage and was on the path to divorce. I'm sorry, Ray. I shouldn't dwell on this now. After all, I'm marrying the man my father approves of, the one I've loved since our first meeting. What, you loved me from the start? I've wanted you since I laid eyes on you, but I guess you already knew that, I remarked, surprised. She gave me a sweet smile and asked when I wanted to set the date. I responded that it was entirely up to her. We both agreed it should happen as soon as possible. I asked if I could start spreading the news, and she said she would do the same. We just needed to settle on a date. We settled on 2 months from then. For the next few days, I was elated. I shared the news with Amy and her husband, Kenny, who were thrilled for us. I needed to inform the kids. I called their home and connected with them both through the console so I could share the news simultaneously. They both exclaimed their happiness and expressed their fondness for Angie. I assured them it was happening in a couple of months, and that they were among the first to know. When I entered Angie's office, her secretary Mary congratulated me. She informed me that Angie had already spread the news, invited everyone to the wedding reception. Mary then called Angie and beckoned me in. Angie was waiting, tears silently streaming down her face. What's wrong, Angie? I called the prison, spoke to the warden, and requested a day's leave for my dad to attend our wedding. He informed me that my dad is prohibited from leaving the prison under any circumstances. His life sentence is final. He expressed regret but said there was nothing he could do. I'm deeply sorry, Angie. I understand how much your father's presence means to you. It's deteriorating, Ray. Despite being in remission, Dad's cancer has resurfaced. He has 3 to 6 months left. Tears welled in her eyes, and I enveloped her in my arms. Why, Lord? Why put her through this? She's a good soul. My heart ached for her. Angie, I've been buying cigarettes for your dad since I got out. It was a deal between us, I'm sorry. It's not your fault. Dad doesn't smoke anymore. He uses the packs sent to him to trade with other inmates. You didn't cause his cancer, Angie assured. An idea sparked in my mind, but I hesitated to share it with Angie, not wanting to extinguish her hope. I kissed her goodbye, promising to see her the next day. I skipped work and headed to the prison to meet Keeler and the warden. Keeler greeted me with a smile. You take care of my girl, Ray. Just make her happy. She deserves better than what life's thrown her way. I pitched my idea to Keeler, met with initial resistance, but eventually secured his agreement, pending the warden's approval. I bid him farewell, heading to the warden's office. The warden welcomed me. Well, Ray, I see you're staying composed and getting hitched. Sorry about Keeler, but as a lifer, we can't release him for his daughter's wedding. Warden, are you fully in charge here, making most decisions? What's your angle, Ray? Can we hold the wedding on the prison premises? Use the chapel, and Keeler can walk his daughter down the aisle.
You want to marry here in prison just so her father can attend?
Is that it? Yes, sir. She hasn't seen him in over 14 years, and he's nearing the end of the road. We only need the chapel for the ceremony. I know weddings have happened here before. All right, Ray. I'll arrange it. Keep it small. You can invite 3 guests besides yourselves. Let Keeler bring some fellow inmates. You'll need a prison attendant. I expressed gratitude to the warden and hurried back to Keeler. Dave, I called him by name, and he chuckled. The warden greenlighted the plan. I'm off to tell Angie. Thanks, Dave. It means the world to her. He smiled. Ray, jot down this number, Keeler said, handing me a note. I noted it down for Angie. When you visit the bank, ask Angie to bring her birth certificate. The account is registered under her maiden name, Keeler instructed. I expressed sympathy for Dave's illness. Just look after my little girl. That's all I ask, he responded. Returning to Angie's office, she noticed my smile and inquired, What's happening? You don't mind getting married in prison, do you? I questioned. What's this about, Ray? I recounted my conversation with the warden, mentioning that her father would be permitted to walk her down the aisle. Tears of joy welled up in her eyes. God, I love you, Ray. I informed her about the safety deposit box, and we proceeded to inspect its contents. I'm Angelina Juanita Miller, and I'd like to access my safety deposit box, Angie informed the attendant, who examined her birth certificate. He escorted us to the safe deposit box, unlocked it, and exited the room. The first thing we noticed was a note from her father. Dear Angie, if you're opening this box, it means you're either getting married or I've already passed away. I hope it's the former. In the little box is your mother's engagement ring. I know everyone wondered where it went, but I put it here for safekeeping. I want you to have it and wear it with pride. Your mother had her faults, but she loved you, and I know she would want you to have her wedding ring. There are also bonds here totaling over $115,000 that will help pay for your wedding. I formalized them before I was sent away. When you see your brother and sister, tell them there's a box for each of them too. If they haven't gotten theirs yet, only yours has a ring in it. Congratulations, and always be honest with your husband. With love, Daddy. Angie and I discussed our wedding plans, opting to invite her brother Brad and sister Lisa, along with my sister Amy. We planned to extend invitations to family and friends for the reception scheduled shortly after the ceremony. Angie and Amy dedicated the following month to preparing for the event, though it incurred additional expenses due to the short notice. However, I was determined to fulfill as much of Angie's dream as possible. Amy volunteered to capture the event with her digital camera. We visited Angie's siblings, where she introduced me to them. They clarified that while they didn't harbor animosity toward their father, they disapproved of his actions. Angie explained the significance of the wedding and the circumstances surrounding it, leading Brad and Lisa to tears upon learning of their father's terminal condition. After agreeing to attend, Angie provided them with their bank deposit box numbers, revealing their father's unexpected provisions. On the wedding day, Angie and I drove to the prison together, accompanied by Amy and her husband, who waited in the car. Upon our arrival, I arranged for a suit for Keeler, delivered by a guard, while I donned a rented tuxedo. Amy assisted Angie with her wedding attire in another room, as Angie preferred I not see her until the ceremony. Inside the chapel, I awaited Angie's entrance, alongside Brad and Lisa, who would serve as my best man and Angie's maid of honor, respectively. A prisoner played the piano, setting a solemn atmosphere, while additional prisoners, friends of Keeler, Dave, were seated. The warden, accompanied by the priest, announced refreshments after the ceremony, displaying unexpected kindness. As Here Comes the Bride filled the chapel, everyone rose to their feet. Angie entered, escorted by her father, tears streaming down both their faces. Angie's wish had been granted. Her father would walk her down the aisle on her wedding day. Once they reached the front, the audience took their seats, leaving only the small wedding party standing. Another guard entered and shut the door. The priest inquired, "Who presents this woman to marry this man?" "Yes, sir," Dave responded proudly before taking his seat. "Angelina Juanita Miller Brady. Do you accept Raymond Michael Harper as your husband?" the priest asked, proceeding with the ceremony. He posed the same question to me. We both solemnly affirmed our commitment to love and cherish each other from that day forward. After exchanging vows, I kissed the bride. Angie then embraced and kissed her father. We adjourned to an adjoining room to chat briefly and partake in cake and punch provided by the warden. Brad and Lisa approached their father, embracing him for the first time in nearly 15 years. Tears flowed, mingling joy with remorse. Aware of their father's terminal condition, they sought to reaffirm their love for him. Amy documented moments throughout the ceremony, capturing heartfelt interactions among Dave and his children. Her photos, encompassing tears, embraces, and even some laughter, were swiftly developed and enlarged at a 24-hour photo center. Expressing gratitude to Dave and the warden for fulfilling Angie's wish, we bid them farewell. As we departed, Brad and Lisa were still engaged in conversation with their father, a heartening sight. Returning to town for the reception, we were greeted enthusiastically by all our invited guests. Kyle and Kayla eagerly embraced us upon our arrival, their excitement palpable. Entering the auditorium, we were met with jubilant cheers. Tears welled in the eyes of my parents and nearly everyone who greeted us. Angie's friends, many unfamiliar to me, also welcomed us warmly. Notably, Mary approached, offering hugs of congratulations. Around 30 minutes later, Amy arrived with the photographs. She enlarged several of them and laid them out on a table for everyone to view. Brad and Lisa stopped by to collect their families. Brad was accompanied by his wife and 2 children, while Lisa was with her husband and 3 children. They all gathered around Dave's picture, explaining to the kids that he was their grandfather. Amy informed them that she had taken 4 sets of photos, and after the reception, each family would receive 1 set to take home. There was one for Brad and Lisa, one for Angie and me, and naturally, one for Amy. I must mention how stunning Angie looked in her wedding gown. If she had wings, she would have resembled an angel sent by God. She was the most exquisite woman I had ever seen, and now she was my wife. I believe most men feel similarly about their wives. We danced, dined, and danced some more, accompanied by the clinking of glasses. Our lips were practically inseparable throughout the evening. Colleagues at work told me I was incredibly fortunate, but trust me, I didn't need to be reminded. I knew I had found something precious, and I intended to cherish it forever. For those curious, Deb and Pat were absent from our wedding. It was Angie's special day, and I wanted nothing to mar it. Witnessing her and her father walking down the aisle, seeing her brother and sister reconcile with their father, and witnessing the family coming together once more, these are moments I will never forget. Update: it's been 6 months since our wedding. Debbie and Pat tied the knot last month. I'm glad to see Debbie making a genuine effort to turn her life around. My kids report that Pat is treating them well. I inquired about Aunt Sandy and Uncle Bob, and my kids informed me they relocated to another state. I transitioned to the day shift to spend more time with the kids and be home with Angie every night. Angie became pregnant with our baby 3 months after our wedding. Dave Keeler passed away. The kids visited him monthly until his passing. It was a somber moment, but we were able to share the news of Angie's pregnancy with him. We informed him it was a boy, and we planned to name him David Raymond. That brought a smile to Dave's face, reflecting on everything: the betrayal of my cheating wife, meeting the woman of my dreams in prison, and marrying her. I realize I'm starting anew and preparing to become a father once more. Not a day passes without me thanking God for all I have. I'm grateful for the opportunity He's given Angie and me to find happiness again. That's all.
I trudged home after a grueling day at the office, only to find that Alice wasn't around. Alice. I called as I climbed the stairs. I'm back. I'll be down in a sec, Spartan, she responded from above. It was a little joke we had. We'd met at a costume party where I'd been dressed as Spartan. We nearly bumped into each other, and I'd apologized, but she cut me off with, "You're Spartan," while poking me in the chest. I'd pointed at her chest and said, "I'm Alice," which made her laugh. It turned out her real name was actually Alice, and from that moment, we were Spartan and Alice. We'd been married for what I thought were 5 blissful years. I cracked open a beer, plopped on the couch, and tuned into the 6 o'clock news. The headlines had just ended when Alice finally descended the stairs. My jaw nearly hit the floor. She was wearing my favorite little black dress. It was mid-thigh length, and while the cleavage wasn't exactly red carpet material, it was far from modest. The backless design made it clear she wasn't wearing a bra, though the movement of her breasts gave that away too. To top it off, she was wearing the necklace I'd given her for our anniversary just a month ago. I fumbled for my phone to snap a picture, even though I wasn't quite sure why I'd need it. "Wow, didn't know we were dating," I said. "Let me freshen up and change clothes. By the way, where are we heading?" "We're not going anywhere," she replied. David Sinclair invited me to dinner and dancing tonight. I'll probably be late, so don't wait up for me. David Sinclair, who was banned from all company parties after his reputation took a dive for messing around with too many married women. He's not like that, Alice insisted. He's just an uptight jerk with a jealous husband who caused all the drama. Well, there's one jealous husband right here who's not about to let you date him, I said. I don't belong to you, she shot back, heading for the door. You may not belong to me, but when we exchanged our vows, we committed ourselves to each other. That means something to me. I thought it meant something to you too. Oh, don't be so old-fashioned, she sneered. We're in the 21st century now. Nobody believes in that stuff anymore. It's a shame you didn't tell me earlier. We could have just divorced and moved on. Divorce? I echoed. What do you mean? She laughed dismissively. As she walked out, I grabbed an old bat from the closet just as the Lexus pulled up. Here comes David. Order yourself a pizza or something, she called out. She headed outside, and I yelled, Alice. When she turned around, I ripped her dress off, leaving her standing in just a tight black thong and heels. She froze momentarily, then dashed back into the house. I walked towards the Lexus, tapping the bat on my palm as Sinclair sped off, tires screeching. I nodded at my neighbors, who were clearly enjoying Alice's impromptu show, and went back inside to return the bat to the closet. I grabbed a fresh beer, since the first one was already warm, and settled back on the couch, waiting for the inevitable drama. It didn't take long. Alice stormed downstairs, wrapped in a robe and seething with anger. Her tirade was a mix of fury and frustration that I could barely follow. I heard expletives that I didn't even know were in her vocabulary. I just sat there until she ran out of steam. What were you thinking? I asked, bewildered. What were you hoping for? I don't know, she admitted. Our lives have gotten so monotonous that we never have any fun anymore. Why am I only hearing about this now? And the last few times I tried to change things up, you were either too busy, uninterested, or it was just gross. Even if you can justify cheating, why humiliate me like this? I didn't want to lie, she explained. I thought if I told you, it wouldn't count as cheating. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, I said. Sleeping with someone else without my consent is definitely cheating. Maybe you'd allow it, she suggested, looking at me with false hope. You've really lost your mind, I said, feeling the rage bubble up. I need to get out of here before I do something we'll both regret. I snatched the keys and bolted before she could even get up from her seat. I did what any self-respecting man would do in my shoes. I went to my favorite bar to drown my sorrows. What's wrong, Michael? Ben asked, sliding another bottle my way. You look like you lost your best friend. Maybe you're not too far off, I replied. I came home to find Alice dressed to the nines, telling me she was going out with David Sinclair from work and that I shouldn't wait up. Of course you told her no, Ben said. Of course I did. What kind of fool do you think I am? I almost went off on him when he smirked and said, just messing with you, dude. So what happened next? Well, she gave me the usual spiel about not owning her and how loyalty is outdated. I guess you didn't buy it? Ding, 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 I said. You got it right. At that moment, Sinclair's car pulled up, and Alice headed for the door. I grabbed a bat from the closet and, following her outside, tore off her dress right there in the street. She stood frozen for a moment, then realized all the neighbors were watching her in just a thong and scampered back into the house. I walked to the car, still holding the bat, and watched as Sinclair sped away. Looks like a win for you, Ben said. So, what's bringing you here tonight? The victory was short-lived. I was sipping my beer when Alice reappeared downstairs, pouting like a bear with a sore head. As she calmed down, she started ranting about our routine sex life and claimed that if she had my permission, it wouldn't be cheating. Ben was at a loss for words. I knew I needed to get out of there, so here I am. Ben cracked open a few more cold bottles, and we clinked glasses and drank. After a couple more drinks, I decided to call it a night before I risked driving under the influence. "Good night and good luck, Michael," Ben said. "Thanks, Ben. I think I'm going to need it." When I got back home, Alice was already in bed. I went through my usual evening routine, slipped into my pajamas, and crawled into bed with my back turned to her. As I drifted off, I thought I heard her quietly sobbing, but I chose to ignore it. The next morning, Alice was up early, making breakfast. Our meal was eerily quiet, and once we finished cleaning up, Alice started up again. "Michael, why can't you see that times have changed? No one expects to stay with just one person for their entire life anymore." "Well, I don't think I'm alone in this," I replied. "As for staying with one person for life, neither of us was a virgin. We dated others before we met. You know that's not what I mean. We were just kids back then, barely understanding anything. Now we have more experience and more to compare." "I don't need to compare anything," I said. "I did a lot of comparing before I asked you to marry me. I chose you because I knew you were the one I wanted to spend my life with. When you said yes, I thought you felt the same way. Did you lie?" "No, but what? Have you changed your mind? If so, maybe we should just get a divorce." "I don't want a divorce." "Well, you can't have it both ways. If you don't want a divorce, you'll need to forget about this nonsense." Alice lowered her gaze and said, "I don't want a divorce." "Then it's decided," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced. Despite Alice's claims that she had given up on seeing other men, I found it hard to believe. I was on edge every time she was late or didn't call when she said she would. The tension between us was palpable, and it even affected our intimacy. Everything felt more cautious and less passionate. Finally, I lost my composure. "Alice, I want a divorce." She looked shocked. "But I thought we were okay." "Really? Do you think everything's fine? Do you believe we're anywhere near where we used to be, when things were good?" She lowered her eyes and shook her head. "Telling my parents was the hardest part. They couldn't grasp why we couldn't make it work. When my father-in-law cornered me one day, I showed him a photo of Alice half-dressed, and he backed off. We faced a lot of questions from the family. I let the wine flow to shield Alice from embarrassment, but ultimately, I had to show everyone the photo and explain what she had been up to. Alice's family came down hard on her, and she came to me looking for sympathy. "Michael, is there really nothing I can do to change your mind about the divorce?" I put my hand to my chin and thought for a moment. I came up with an idea that I was sure she wouldn't like. "Okay, Alice, I won't stop the divorce, but I'll postpone it on one condition." Her mood lifted immediately. "Anything, Michael? Be careful when you say anything. It's a lot." "I'm not worried," she said. "I'm sure you won't go crazy." "So, what's the condition?" she asked eagerly. "I'll let you date other men as long as I can date other women." I was pretty sure I saw a grin flash across her face before she masked it with a sickly sweet smile. "Of course, Michael, that's fair. What a piece of work." I was convinced she hadn't expected me to find another woman. "There's one more thing," I said. "What?" "You can't start dating until I've had a chance to find someone myself." She seemed thrilled, probably thinking she already had someone in mind and was worried I might not find anyone. I decided to give her a little incentive. "If I can't find a date within 2 weeks, you can go ahead with your plans." This brought one of the brightest smiles I'd seen from her in weeks. She threw her arms around my neck and kissed me. "That's great, Michael. Thank you. You'll see, this will be just what our marriage needs." Yes, it might just revive it, or flush it down the drain. A few days later, Alice was taken aback when I told her I had a date and suggested we go on a double date the next day. She probably thought I was bluffing and that she'd be out on a date while I stayed home alone. Without Alice knowing, I had lined up a date I hoped would put an end to this madness once and for all. On Monday, I took a long lunch to buy new clothes and left them in the car. On Friday, I left work early to get my hair done and make sure I was home before Alice. I snuck into the guest room with my new outfit and got ready in the shower. When I heard the garage door open, I finished shaving, brushing my teeth, and went to the bedroom to complete my look. Alice seemed surprised when I emerged from the guest room in a new outfit and with a fresh hairstyle, but she quickly regained her composure. "David will pick me up at 6:30. "Fine. We have a reservation with Olivia at 7 o'clock. "The table is in my name in case you get there before us," I said as I walked out the door. What Alice didn't know was that we had a new hire at work, Isabel Ramirez. Isabel was a stunning redhead who turned heads everywhere she went. She was completely professional, never feeding office gossip. We'd struck up a casual friendship, and though she flirted with me from time to time, I would always politely show her my wedding ring. So, when I asked her out for drinks after work, she was intrigued. I arrived at the bar before she did and was staring into my glass when she walked in. "So, Michael, what's got the last Boy Scout of America out of his shell?" she asked with a laugh. One look at my forlorn expression quickly sobered her. "Oh, Michael, I'm so sorry," she said, placing a warm hand on mine. "I didn't mean to tease you. You look like you've lost your best friend." My eyes began to well up, and I turned away. Isabel put her arm around my shoulders and guided me to a table. I took a sip of my drink while she sat patiently, giving me the space I needed to gather my thoughts and muster the courage to tell her my story. "Well," she said, once I'd finished, "there's only one thing we can do." "We?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, we," she confirmed. "I'll be your date." I laughed for the first time since Alice dropped this bombshell of an idea. "Why are you laughing?" "I'm serious," she insisted. I looked into her eyes, half expecting a gotcha moment, but her sincerity was clear. "Why me?" "I know you don't date married men. Hell, you barely even flirt with single men. If the guys at the office thought they had a chance with you, there'd be a line around the block." "I'm not just looking for a date," she said. "Like you said, I can date anyone I want. But I really like you. Maybe it's because you don't always undress me with your eyes. Not that you don't sometimes, it'd be weird if you didn't. But you always treat me with respect. When we talk, you actually listen and support my ideas when others dismiss them just because they come from me. More importantly, I like you, and I'm angry at your wife for treating you so poorly. So, are we on a date or not? I might not have been born yesterday, but I wasn't born last night either. You're in." I finished off the rest of my drink and walked Isabel to her car. She gave me her number, shared a friendly hug, and drove off. I had a feeling my life was about to get a lot more interesting. When I pulled up to Isabel's place, I barely had time to get out and open her door before she reached the car. She was a bit taller than Alice but still shorter than me. Her dress, emerald green and tight, fell just below the knee, with a daring slit up the left side almost to her thigh. Her wavy red hair cascaded down to her mid-waist, and the dress showed more cleavage than I'd ever seen on Alice. As I helped her into the car, she almost slipped, giving me a brief but tantalizing glimpse of her creamy white thigh before she adjusted her dress, flashing me a bright smile. "We'll have plenty of time for that later," she said, her voice a sultry purr. I had to compose myself before driving, feeling a bit awkward from her laugh and touch. As if that wasn't enough, she began rubbing my thigh. Luckily, we arrived at the restaurant before things got too far, and I managed to regain control as we walked in. Alice and David were already there. I'd seen David a few times before, and his appearance that evening made no more impression on me than usual. Alice, on the other hand, was furious. I don't think I've ever seen her so worked up. David didn't stand up, so I didn't offer my hand, merely nodding at Alice while helping Isabel into her seat. Alice was clearly shocked to see me with such an attractive date. I think she was going to make a snide comment but thought better of it. David, however, couldn't take his eyes off Isabel's cleavage. Alice had to elbow him to keep his gaze from wandering. Dinner started off awkwardly but soon felt like just another night out with two normal couples, rather than husband and wife with different partners. Afterward, we went to a club to drink and dance. The fast dances were uneventful, but during the slow songs, Isabel pressed herself against me, and I could feel Alice's glare piercing through me. Alice was practically grinding on David, trying to make a scene. She attracted quite a bit of attention, but she seemed oblivious to it, lost in her own world. When David's hand slipped under her dress to caress her breasts, I felt a wave of embarrassment and quickly led Isabel back to our table. We watched Alice and David put on their show until the manager approached them and asked them to leave. Alice dashed to the table in tears, grabbed her coat, and left with David following closely behind. "Well, you certainly know how to have a good time with a girl," Isabel said, giggling. I could only laugh and we returned to the dance floor. When we were ready to leave, I approached the manager. "I'd like to apologize for our companions," I said. "Don't worry about it," he replied. "No complaints here." "I understand. Please come again." I took Isabel to her apartment and walked her to the door. As I leaned in for a friendly goodnight kiss, she surprised me by pulling me close for a passionate kiss. Isabel asked, "Would you like to come in for a nightcap?" There was a certain glint in her eye that hinted she had more on her mind than just a drink, but who was I to argue? The glass was quickly forgotten as soon as the door closed behind us. She pushed me onto the sofa and straddled my lap, the slit in her dress widening to give me an enticing view. With deliberate slowness, she unbuttoned the top of her dress, letting it fall to her waist and revealing her firm, captivating breasts. Before I knew it, she slid to the floor and began unbuttoning my trousers. Her movements were agonizingly slow, and I found myself struggling to keep my composure. She settled back onto me, and I could feel her warmth pressing against me. In that moment, it struck me that, despite Alice's complaints about our sex life being stale, she had never allowed me such intimate positions. Alice always said it was humiliating. Clearly, Isabel didn't share that view. After a while, I rolled over beside her, and she nestled against me, resting her head on my shoulder. As we lay there, a nervous thought crossed my mind. Isabel, in all the excitement, I had forgotten to use a condom. "It's okay," she reassured me, sensing my anxiety. "I'm on the pill." I cupped her chin, lifted her face to mine, and kissed her tenderly, our tongues meeting in a gentle dance. I lost track of time as we made love, but it felt like mere moments before we drifted into a blissful sleep. Lying there, I couldn't help but think about Alice's claim that our sex life was monotonous. If anything, my night with Isabel had shown me it wasn't because of me. The next morning, we showered separately. While Isabel finished up, I made breakfast. When she saw the spread, she commented, "Wow, you're not just a great lover, you're also a cook. I could get used to having you around." As we sat down to eat, I said, "Isabel, I really like you, and last night was the best sex I've ever had. But I need to sort out my marriage first. Even if we do get divorced, I'm not sure how soon I'll be ready for another relationship." "Don't worry, Michael," she said, "I was just teasing you. I like you too, and if things work out, I could definitely see us together. But you're right, first, you need to settle things with your wife." After breakfast, we chatted about trivial things until I decided it was time to head home and see if anything could be salvaged from my marriage. When I walked in, I found Alice sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red from crying. Seeing my contented expression made her burst into tears. I took a cup of coffee and sat down across from her. So, how was your night with David? Oh, Michael, she sobbed, it was terrible. All I could think about was you and Isabel. She's so beautiful, and I know I can't compete with her. You wouldn't have to worry about competition if you hadn't started this mess, I said. Alice couldn't meet my gaze but nodded in agreement. I think you'd feel less regret if it was just me and David left alone at home. She looked up, her eyes filled with tears, then nodded again. I just don't know what to do. Part of me wants to kick you out and start over with someone new. Alice was openly sobbing now, clearly tormented by the situation. But then I look at you and see the person I married, the one I fell in love with. I don't see an evil woman, just a confused girl. I hope there's a way back for us. Alice's hope was evident in her tear-filled eyes. I'm going to change and go out for a while. When I return, we'll talk again. Please don't make me move out, Michael. How can we be together if we're apart? I need you now more than ever. You don't understand, I said. It's not just about us getting back together. Maybe you should have considered how much you needed me before starting this. I went upstairs to our bedroom, leaving Alice at the table. When I came back down, Alice was still sitting there, watching me with hopeful eyes. I shook my head sadly and walked out of the house. I know it sounds cold, but I needed Alice to feel the fragility of our marriage. I walked down to the Charles River and sat on a bench, watching the rowers and sailboats. I felt a pang of sadness as I wondered if I'd ever have children with Alice. I don't know how long I sat there, but as the sun began to set and the chill set in, I took a deep breath and trudged back home. When I entered the house, Alice was still at the table. She looked up at me with hope, but I simply shook my head, went up to my room, and locked the door. I lay on the bed, fully dressed, covering my eyes with my hand. I don't know how long I lay there before I heard a soft knock and a whisper, Michael. I didn't answer, and after a second knock, I heard her footsteps retreating to the guest room. After making sure she had gone to bed, I quickly showered and fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, I went downstairs to find Alice had prepared a large breakfast. Surprisingly, I had a good appetite, though Alice only picked at her food. Michael, she said, do you think we could try seeing a psychologist? I considered the idea. I didn't know much about counseling and wondered if they'd try to get me to agree with Alice's perspective. If that was the case, I could always leave. But I wanted to work things out. From my night with Isabel, I'd learned that our sex life had become mundane. Did I really want to go back to that? Despite my anger at Alice for never addressing her issues with me directly, I decided I still had enough love for her. I wasn't ready to give up without a fight. Okay, Alice, let's get something straight, I said. She almost jumped out of her chair. I don't want a counselor whose goal is to save our marriage. Whether it can be saved or not is irrelevant. I won't tolerate any hidden agendas. I could tell she was disappointed. She must have been hoping for some New Age therapist who would endorse her times have changed philosophy, but she had no choice but to agree. The consultation turned out to be surprisingly effective. Alice had to face how her refusal to work with me was contributing to her dissatisfaction with our sex life, and I realized I needed to be more assertive. We discussed what we wanted, needed, and expected from our intimacy. Although counseling helped us address many issues, I remained focused on her betrayal, even if I didn't let it dominate our interactions. Alice, on her part, couldn't get past her insecurities about Isabel. Despite my assurances that, although I had some feelings for Isabel, I was not in love with her and that our date was merely a response to the situation, Alice simply didn't accept it. In the end, we decided to part ways amicably. Once the divorce was finalized, I took time to reflect on my life. I didn't immediately reach out to Isabel. Instead, I booked a stay at a bed and breakfast on the Mina coast. The weather was unpredictable, mirroring my mood, but I needed to relax and contemplate my next steps. When I returned, I called Isabel. We went to dinner, and though we ended up in bed together, it was more for comfort than passion. The next morning, as we lay in bed, she asked, "Penny for your thoughts, Michael?" I replied, "I was thinking how easy it would be to pick you up and ask you to stay with me forever. But I know that the easy way isn't always the best." She smiled slyly and said, "Get your mind out of the gutter. I don't just mean sex, you pervert. I really like you, and I know I could easily fall in love with you, but I'm concerned it might be unfair to both of us since my divorce is still fresh. I think it's better if we both see other people for a while, as well as each other. I can't guarantee how long this will last, and I won't ask you to wait for me." I wanted to argue, but I knew she was right. We got out of bed, used the bathroom, showered separately, and had a quiet breakfast. I was tempted to ignore our agreement and pursue a relationship with Isabel, and I think she might have been tempted too, but I was determined. After we finished cleaning up, she walked me to the door, and we hugged, tears in our eyes. "I think this is goodbye," she said. "No, I don't agree," I replied. "Why don't we meet for dinner in 2 weeks, just to check in on how things are going?" "Okay," she agreed, kissed me on the cheek, and led me out the door. The sound of the door closing felt like a prison door, and I wasn't sure if I'd made the worst mistake of my life. I spent the rest of the week questioning my sanity. On Friday, I decided to join some friends for dinner and drinks. We sat in a corner booth at the back of the restaurant, with me facing the door. As we were finishing dessert, I saw her walk in. Isabel was with a tall, handsome guy. Who was I kidding? Of course, he was tall and handsome. I was torn about whether to say hello, but I decided against it, respecting our breakup. I was disappointed at how quickly she seemed to have moved on. I guess you could call me a coward because I waited until she went to the restroom before leaving some cash on the table and saying a quick goodbye to my friends. I was angry with her for not waiting longer to start dating again and even angrier with myself. It was something we both agreed on. One thing was certain, I needed to get back into the dating scene. I flatter myself that I'm a pretty good catch, and I had no problem arranging a date for the following Friday. Her name was Heather Price. She worked as a secretary for one of my clients, and we'd had some flirtatious exchanges in the past. She knew I was married, but she readily agreed once I mentioned my divorce. Heather had always seemed attractive in a professional sense, but I was surprised by how stunning she looked when she opened the door. "I think I'm pretty well prepared," she said. "That's an understatement," I replied, noticing her readiness. "Just let me put on my cloak," she said. I helped her with it, and we went out. Dinner was filled with the usual first date conversation, though we discussed my divorce. Heather was shocked by Alice's actions. Over coffee and dessert, I decided to be upfront. "Heather, I don't want to deceive you. Before my divorce was finalized, I was involved with someone, and after my divorce, things got serious. We both agreed to see other people for a while to avoid rushing into anything. I don't want you to think I'm just using you as a placeholder. I'm open to whatever happens." Her response was reassuring. "Michael, this is just our first date. I'm not expecting any commitment. I appreciate your honesty. Let's just see where things go." With that awkwardness behind us, we had a pleasant evening, ending with a warm kiss and plans for the following Saturday. Meanwhile, I had a dinner planned with Isabel and was unsure of how it would go. When she arrived, she was as beautiful as ever. During dinner, she suddenly became serious after our orders were placed. "You know, I saw you," she said. I raised my eyebrows, curious. "I saw you with your friends the other night. I was going to come over and say hello, but when I came out of the restroom, you were already gone." I felt a little embarrassed. "I know we agreed to see other people, but seeing you with someone else so soon made me a bit jealous." "It's silly, I know." "Michael, you had no reason to be jealous," she continued. "Ethan is an old friend I hadn't seen in a while. When he called, I took the opportunity to have dinner with him. It wasn't anything significant. No need to apologize. If there was any upset, it was all in my head. In fact, it motivated me to finally get off my butt and ask someone out. We had dinner last week. Her eyebrows raised at that. Should I be feeling jealous? She asked, a playful smile on her face. Oh, I wouldn't worry about that, I replied. We've got another date planned for tomorrow night. We both agree there's no commitment here, just two people enjoying each other's company. That's nice, she said, her smile tinged with wistfulness. You deserve to have a good time. Our awkward conversation was cut short as our dinners arrived, shifting our chat to lighter subjects. Would you like to go dancing? I asked, opening the car door for her. No, I think it would be better if you just took me home, she replied. The drive was quiet. She stared out the window, lost in thought. We reached her door, shared a kiss that was perhaps a bit more intense than we intended, and gently separated. Please stay in touch, Michael, she said. I will, I assured her. Good night, Isabel, I said, quickly retreating to my car before attempting to get her inside. My date with Heather went well. Our goodbye kiss was more passionate, and we even did a bit of petting, but we decided to break things off before it went too far. Even though I spoke with Isabel every week or so, we never actually met up. I'm not sure if we were avoiding each other subconsciously or if it was just fate. I saw Heather a few more times. We ended up in bed and had fun, but there was no real spark. After our third night together, Heather dropped a bombshell. Michael, I think this should be the last time, she said. What? I thought everything was fine. Well, it might have been too fine, she replied, sounding perplexed. Michael, when we started, we agreed there'd be no commitment. I made it clear I wasn't looking for anything serious, and I didn't have any feelings then, but now I'm starting to develop feelings for you. If we keep going, I think we might head down a path I'm not ready for. I'd rather end this now before the feelings deepen and cause more pain later. I hope that makes sense. In a way, it did. It hurt, but I knew I'd get through it. I dressed, kissed her forehead, and made my way to the door. Good night, Heather. Goodbye, Michael, she said, her sad smile and teary eyes telling their own story. After closing the door, I pondered my next move. I started dating a string of women. Some were one-night stands, others were short-lived relationships, but none of them were serious. Eventually, I figured out what was missing and decided to make a call. Hello, she answered. Isabel, it's Michael, I said, forgetting she had caller ID. Isabel, I don't know where you are right now, but I'm done with casual rebounds. I'm ready to settle down if you'll have me. I want to come home. There was a pause on the other end, and I began to worry I'd missed my chance. How soon can you come? Alice had stayed in town, living a solitary life with her cats, and she certainly wasn't looking for work in a Mexican brothel. I wasn't truly serious about her, but I saw Heather a few more times. We ended up in bed again, and while it was fun, the spark just wasn't there. After our third night together, Heather dropped the same bombshell on me again. Michael, I think this should be the last time. What? I thought we were fine, I protested. Maybe too fine, she said, her words confusing me. Michael, we agreed on no commitment. I didn't have any feelings at the start, but now I'm developing them. If we keep this up, we might end up in a place I'm not ready for. I'd rather end things now before the feelings get too deep and hurt more later. I hope this makes sense. It did, in a strange way. It hurt, but I would move on. I got dressed, kissed her forehead, and headed to the door. Good night, Heather. Goodbye, Michael, she replied, her sad smile and teary eyes reflecting her own pain. I closed the door and thought about my next move. Some of my dating experiences were one-night stands, others were brief relationships, but none of them turned serious. Eventually, I realized what was truly missing in my life and decided to pick up the phone. "Hello?" she answered. "Isabel, it's Michael," I said, completely forgetting she had caller ID. "Isabel, I don't know what's going on with you, but I'm done with endless rebounds. I've had more ups and downs than a pinball machine, and I'm ready for something more. If you're still open to it, I want to come home." There was a pause on the other end, and I feared I might have missed my chance. "How soon can you come?" she finally asked. Alice hadn't left town in disgrace. She lived a solitary life surrounded by her cats and certainly wasn't seeking work in a Mexican brothel. Though I wasn't particularly curious, mutual friends mentioned she was dating, but no one serious seemed to be in the picture. Isabel wanted to invite Alice to our wedding. Although I had reservations, I didn't object. Alice declined the invitation but sent a lovely gift instead. I was surprised when Isabel developed a casual friendship with Alice, meeting occasionally for coffee or shopping. It didn't bother me, although it was certainly unusual. About 6 months after we got married, I came home to find Isabel dressed up and ready to go out. "Oh, here we go again," I thought. But fortunately, my concerns were misplaced. "Go change," she said. "We're meeting Alice at Olivia's for dinner." "Look, I know you two have become pretty close, but don't you think this is a bit much?" I asked. "Don't worry, dear. There's a method to my madness," she replied. I knew better than to argue when she had her mind set on something, so I shrugged and went to change. When we arrived, Alice was already there, and the situation was as awkward as could be. Isabel and Alice exchanged cheek kisses, as women do, while I just stood there, feeling out of place. Neither of us seemed to know what to do. Alice broke the silence. "Michael, good to see you. You look great." "Thanks, Alice. You look good too." We were spared further awkwardness as we were shown to our table. Isabel paused to speak with the man at the counter. "What's this all about?" I asked when she rejoined us. "Don't worry about it, honey," she said. "Every husband knows that when his wife says nothing, it usually means something, and he should be concerned." But there was nothing I could do except go along with it and hope for the best. Alice sat to my right, with Isabel opposite her. Before we could even order drinks, the owner came over with Ethan. Isabel greeted him warmly, gave him a hug, and seated him on my left, directly across from Alice. It became clear that Isabel's plan was unfolding. While my worst fears hadn't come true, the evening still had the potential for disaster. Fortunately, Alice and Ethan hit it off, and the conversation flowed smoothly throughout dinner. By all accounts, we were like 4 old friends. Before long, it was time to leave. Ethan and I split the bill, and as Isabel and I were heading out, Alice and Ethan decided to extend their evening at the restaurant bar. Isabel was so self-assured, but I couldn't be angry. Although it might not last, they clearly had a good start. We kept up cordial, if somewhat distant, relationships with Alice and Ethan. We rarely saw each other as couples but often met in group settings. Apparently, their relationship was stable, and Alice no longer seemed to need to spice things up. We wished them all the best. Isabel and I couldn't be happier. Though, I must admit, the baby's kicks at night certainly keep her awake.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
That evening, it was just the 4 of us. My wife, Kathy, her sister, Amanda, and Amanda's husband, Roger. It was supposed to be a simple get-together. The night was warm, the pool looked inviting, and the plan was just to relax and have a few drinks by the water. Nothing unusual for 2 couples who'd known each other for years. But right from the start, Amanda seemed to be paying an unusual amount of attention to me. Every so often, she'd find a reason to pull me away from the pool and into the house. "Can you help me get more ice?" she'd ask, or "I need a hand in the kitchen." At first, I didn't think anything of it. Maybe she just needed a little extra help. But as the night went on, the requests became more frequent, and her behavior started to feel a little strange. Each time I tried to go back outside where Kathy and Roger were, Amanda would find a reason to call me back. Her tone was playful, but there was something odd about it. Her hand lingered too long on my arm. Her smile was just a bit too inviting. At first, I wondered if I was reading too much into things. But when I politely declined her requests and said I wanted to go back outside, she took it a step further. This wasn't just flirtation or keeping me talking. She escalated things. Suddenly, right there in the hallway, she undressed completely. She stood there, completely naked, and asked me to have sex with her. I was stunned, completely caught off guard. Amanda, my wife's sister, was standing there, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Why would she do this? Where was Kathy? Part of me felt tempted, I won't lie. I'm not a religious person, but I do have my own sense of morality. I try to live by Christian values, especially when it comes to loyalty and morality. The temptation was real, but reason and my sense of integrity won out. I couldn't give in. No matter how desperate Amanda seemed or how strong the temptation felt, I knew it was wrong. I refused, telling her this wasn't right and that I couldn't do it. Amanda looked shocked, as if she hadn't expected someone to say no, but I wasn't about to betray my wife, despite how strange and unsettling the situation had become. Even after I refused, Amanda didn't back down. She grabbed my hand, holding it tighter than I'd expected, her eyes wide and pleading as she asked, "Why? Why are you refusing? Am I not your type?" I felt cornered, but I didn't want to be harsh. I tried to explain gently. "Amanda, you're a beautiful woman. Anyone else might not have thought twice about this, but some of us hold firm values on certain things." She didn't take it well. Rather than backing off, Amanda grew more determined, her grip on my hand tightening. She started trying to manipulate me, her voice soft and persuasive. "It's just a little experiment," she said. "There's nothing wrong with it, really. No one has to know. It's harmless." I stood there, listening to her desperation, feeling more uncomfortable by the second. Her words were persuasive, almost hypnotic, but something about the entire situation felt off. It wasn't just her behavior, it was everything. The way she'd been pulling me aside all night, and now, her desperate pleas felt calculated. Then it hit me. This wasn't some impulsive moment of madness or a fleeting urge. This was premeditated, a thought-out plan. Amanda had been working all night to pull me away from the pool, from Kathy, keeping me distracted. But if this was all part of a plan, a chilling question gripped me harder than Amanda's hand. Where was my wife, and what was really happening here? I knew I needed to figure it out, and fast. Yet, before I could act, I hesitated, doubts swirling through my mind. What if this was some kind of test? A prank to see how far my loyalty could go? I recalled a recent conversation with Kathy where we had joked about situations like this, talking lightly about loyalty and trust. Back then, it was just harmless banter. But now, standing in that hallway with Amanda, desperate and undressed, I started to wonder, could Kathy have actually arranged this? Would she go so far as to involve her own sister in a twisted test of my faithfulness? The thought seemed absurd, yet strangely plausible. Amanda's desperate behavior now felt too calculated, almost like she was following a script. Could this be a cruel, elaborate way to test my loyalty? Or was something else, something darker at play? It made me question everything, seeing how complexities often lurk even in life's most ordinary moments, waiting to be uncovered. Either way, I knew one thing for certain. I didn't want to continue this unsettling encounter with Amanda. The whole situation was making me sick. I spun around, grabbed the nearest bottle of alcohol off the counter, and stormed out of the house toward the pool. I needed to find my wife, Kathy, and get to the bottom of this insanity. What was going on? And what were these ridiculous tests supposed to prove? Amanda tried to stop me, calling out from behind, but I ignored her. As I stepped outside, I froze in my tracks, my blood running cold. By the pool, in plain view, was a horrifying sight. My wife, Kathy, in Roger's arms, locked in a passionate kiss. It wasn't just some casual, drunken mistake. They were completely entwined, oblivious to everything around them. As I watched, I saw Kathy's hand moving to take off her swimsuit. Rage surged through me, and before I could hold back, I shouted, "What the hell are you doing?" My voice cut across the yard, snapping them out of their trance. Without thinking, I hurled the martini glass in their direction, and it shattered on the pavement near the pool, splashing them with cold liquor. They jumped back, startled and scrambling to cover themselves. The look on Kathy's face was a mix of fear and guilt, and Roger looked just as shaken. For a moment, there was complete silence, thick with tension. Kathy, recovering from the shock, screamed, "Why are you acting like this?" Roger, trying to defuse the situation, raised his hands and said, "Man, what are you doing? Everything's fine. Don't overreact." But everything was far from fine. Just then, Amanda rushed out after me, no doubt hoping to salvage the mess she had helped create. But by now, my anger had fully taken over. These people, my own wife and the people I trusted, had betrayed me, and there was no pretending otherwise. People I thought I knew were playing some twisted game, and I was done with it. We were going to have a serious conversation, and this time there would be no more games. A tense silence hung in the air as Kathy, Roger, and Amanda stared at me, uncertain of what I'd do next. But instead of apologizing or explaining themselves, they did something that made my blood boil even more. They laughed. "Relax," Kathy said, her tone suddenly casual, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. "This is just an experiment, okay? We thought it'd be fun. It's wife swapping." "You're overreacting." Roger nodded with a smirk, as if he were calming a child. "Yeah, man, people do this all the time. It's not a big deal. It makes people happy, you know, helps couples grow closer." My heart pounded as I struggled to process what I was hearing, but before I could respond, Amanda added with a sly smile, "Honestly, what's the problem? Why didn't you want me earlier? Am I not cute enough for you? You could have had some fun too, you know?" I stared at them, stunned. They were serious. They actually thought that this twisted game was something I'd just go along with. This was no longer just about betrayal. It was about how completely disconnected they were from reality, my reality. "You're all insane," I finally snapped, my voice shaking with rage. "This is not normal. This isn't some experiment. You've crossed every line," I said, my voice sharp with disbelief. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? To me? To our marriage?" Kathy rolled her eyes, looking bored. "God, you're so old-fashioned. This is the 21st century. You're just insecure because you don't get it. People do this all the time." "It's freeing." "Insecure?" I yelled, my fists clenched. "I'm standing here watching my wife undress for another man while your sister tries to throw herself at me, and you're calling me insecure?" They all started talking over each other, trying to convince me that I was being unreasonable. Amanda giggled, throwing in her own taunt. "You didn't even want me. I thought men were supposed to like this sort of thing." "That's enough," I shouted, silencing them. My hands shook as I struggled to keep my fury in check. "Do you hear yourselves? Do you have any idea how disgusting this is?" In their desperation to justify themselves, the truth finally slipped out. Roger, attempting to calm things down, said something that hit me like a punch to the gut. "Look, we've been doing this for a while, okay? The three of us. We just thought you'd eventually be up for it. We didn't mean to hurt you." A cold realization washed over me. They'd already crossed that line, long ago, behind my back. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment experiment. They had been planning this, conspiring together, and had been intimate for who knew how long. And now they wanted me to join their twisted little game. I stood there, furious and disgusted, staring at the people I once trusted. This wasn't about happiness or fun. It was betrayal, plain and simple. They looked at me as if I were the one who didn't understand, but I knew better. This wasn't freedom. This was a twisted violation of everything I believed in, and I wasn't going to let them spin it any other way. Kathy spoke up suddenly, her voice disturbingly casual. "You know, when Amanda and I were in college, we swapped boyfriends once. It was fun, actually, just something we did for the thrill of it. After all these years, we remembered that experience and thought we'd try it again. But of course, you ruined everything. I knew you were gloomy, but I hoped you'd loosen up at least a little." I nearly collapsed from shock. My own wife, confessing that she and her sister had done this before, and that she thought it was perfectly fine to spring it on me now. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I turned to Roger, the one person I thought might still have a shred of decency. "And you, Roger?" I asked, my voice laced with disbelief. "If these two have been doing this for ages, what about you? I thought you were a responsible, normal guy. Are you a man or just some yard dog, following your instincts without a second thought?" Roger laughed, brushing off my accusation. "No need to insult me, Ben. I'm just trying to live a little." Then his expression shifted, becoming strangely serious. "Look, why don't we all just calm down, have a drink, and relax? Let's try it together. Right here, right now. You'll see. It'll feel good. Trust me, you just need to let go." Drink a little more to take the edge off. I stood there, crushed by the absurdity of what I was hearing. My wife, her sister, and Roger, the man I'd thought was a decent human being, were all in on this twisted plan to drag me into their chaos. A sense of despair settled over me as I realized just how far gone they were, caught up in their own distorted view of freedom. My mind raced, searching for a way to make them understand just how low they had sunk. So, you think you're modern, sexually advanced, huh? You must think you're so enlightened. I looked at each of them with a mixture of pity and anger. Well, guess what? We're not on the same path. Without waiting for a reply, I turned and stormed into the house, my heart pounding with anger and disbelief. My eyes landed on a fire extinguisher hanging by the kitchen door. I grabbed it, determined to make my point clear. I marched back out to the pool, where they were still lounging, waiting for me to join in their sick game. I yanked the pin from the extinguisher and pointed it straight at them. "Cool down, you scumbsucker," I shouted. "You wanted fun? Well, here's your foam party." I squeezed the handle, and a thick spray of foam exploded across the poolside, covering them in a cold, soapy mess. Kathy screamed in shock. Amanda tried to dodge the blast, and Roger just sat there, dumbfounded. Foam sprayed everywhere, drenching them as I continued shouting, "You want fun? You want modern? Take it all." For the first time that night, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. If they wanted a party, I'd give them one they'd never forget. As they scrambled, covered in foam and completely thrown off, I pulled out my phone and called a taxi. My adrenaline was still pumping, but I knew I had to get out of there before I lost it any further. Before leaving, I turned back to them, my voice steady and loud. "Kathy, I don't want to know you or your crazy sister anymore. And you, Roger? You're just a plastic toy in the hands of these two psychos." I saw the shock register on their faces, but I didn't care. There was nothing left to salvage. Without another glance, I walked away from that house of insanity, leaving them and everything that night had revealed far behind me. When I got home, I didn't hesitate. I packed my things, throwing what I could into a suitcase, knowing I had to escape. There was no way I could stay in the same place, breathing the same air after everything that had happened. A few days later, I began the divorce proceedings. It wasn't easy, but it was the only path forward. Kathy, Amanda, and even Roger still tried to reach out, but only to make me admit I'd overreacted, that I was wrong. They wanted an apology, a way for me to see things from their perspective. It was honestly laughable. So now, listeners, what do you think? Am I the fool here? Did I miss out on some great opportunity to join their twisted little game? Let me tell you, I have honor and dignity, and I refuse to waste them on the pathetic fantasies of pathetic people. You can judge me and call me an old-fashioned conservative if you want, but remember this. Those who rely solely on pleasure, chasing nothing but their own desires, are the ones who ultimately lose. I walked away with my self-respect intact, and that's something they'll never understand. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.